My wife declared, "My ex is coming to my birthday. Be cool, or it's over." I replied, "I'll be very cool." Then I greeted him at the door, shook his hand, and said, "She's all yours, man." I was just leaving. Her party ended the moment I walked out. I measure life in millimeters, not moments, because moments are emotional, and emotions can't fit neatly on a blueprint. I'm Marcus Reed, 34, licensed architect, caffeine enthusiast, and apparently a man who gets turned on by a perfect 90-degree corner. My wife, Sophie Lane, is my chaotic counterpoint, half glitter bomb, half unmedicated optimism. Where I see load-bearing walls, she sees feng shui opportunities. We're the kind of couple that looks balanced from a distance and like an active construction site up close. You know that guy who triple checks the level on a picture frame? That's me. You know that woman who says it's fine while sticking decals on freshly painted walls? That's her. Marriage, ladies and gentlemen, a partnership between precision and chaos, held together by shared Wi-Fi and mild denial. Now, I was building something special, her birthday. Not just any birthday, but the one that would make her friends clutch pearls and whisper, "He really gets her." I didn't want another backyard vibe with warm white lights and half-deflated balloons. No, sir. I wanted architectural glory, a domestic masterpiece that screamed, "Thoughtful husband," and whispered, "I outplanned God." I had an idea that would fuse my profession with romance, a fully automated house system I coded myself, called Aurora. Imagine Alexa on steroids, with mood lighting that could sense conversation tone, music that faded with applause, and timed LED bursts for her cake entrance. I even gave it a voice, calm, gender-neutral, slightly smug. Aurora was my love letter written in binary. Sophie thought I was joking when I said I wanted a lighting rehearsal, but I wasn't. Thursday night before the party, I stood in the living room with a laser measurer, whispering to myself like a lunatic. Angle of dispersion, 45 degrees. Beam intensity, check. Ambient loop, God, that's beautiful. Meanwhile, Sophie was on the couch, painting her nails red and scrolling Pinterest like a general planning a glitter invasion. "Babe, maybe people don't need to feel like they're entering the Met Gala," she teased. "Maybe they just need drinks and fun." I looked up from my tablet and said the nerdiest words known to marriage. Fun is relative to design symmetry. She groaned so hard the thermostat adjusted itself out of pity. Still, I was in my element, curating the guest list like I was assembling the Avengers of suburban sociability. Her work friends, my colleagues, her yoga pals, the neighbor who thinks kombucha is wine. Everyone who ever thought Sophie and I were the perfect match. I made spreadsheets for snacks, timeline charts for speeches, and a social flow plan that mapped traffic between the kitchen and the patio like it was an evacuation drill. I even labeled the bathroom door with a minimalist vinyl sign that said "Relief Zone." I'm not proud, but I'm also not ashamed. The crowning jewel, though, was the bar cart. A rolling temple of liquors and liqueurs, curated with the seriousness of a museum exhibit. I had bourbon that smelled like burnt oak and self-respect, gin infused with herbs I couldn't pronounce, and a champagne cooler that hummed softly, like it knew it was above me in social rank. I imagined Sophie walking in, her eyes lighting up at the spectacle. I pictured her saying, "Marcus, you didn't have to do all this," and me pretending to be modest while secretly hoping she'd nominate me for Husband of the Year. The dream was alive. The dream was laminated. Now, Sophie, God bless her, wasn't ungrateful. She loved the effort. She really did. She'd run her fingers along my printed floor plan and go, "This is why I married you. You make order look sexy." But she also had that twinkle, that mischievous, "what if we just," energy that gave me ulcers. Like when she once moved my drafting table to make room for more creativity. Creativity apparently needed the northeast corner where my sanity used to live. But fine, that's marriage. A constant redesign you didn't approve, but somehow signed. I kept rehearsing my casual host, look in the mirror. You know, the one that says, "Oh, this old thing?" Just a world-class party I threw between errands. I practiced hand gestures too. Casual hand in pocket, welcoming smile, confident nod to the playlist. I wanted to look like a man in control of chaos. My reflection, however, looked like a man auditioning for a toothpaste commercial while dying inside. Sophie walked in mid-pose. "You good?" she asked, eyebrow raised. Totally, I lied. Just visualizing success. You look like you're trying to sell a timeshare, she said, grabbing a snack. Love is honesty, even when it's brutal. Then came the moment that shifted the entire architectural balance of my peaceful existence. 3 days before the party, Tuesday afternoon, I was in my office, reviewing final catering emails. Sophie strolled in wearing joggers, hair up, holding a pair of scissors and a coupon book. She looked like every suburban goddess who multitasks between domesticity and mild destruction. Hey babe, she said sweetly, clipping away. Quick thing. You know those 2 words, quick thing, that precede emotional earthquakes? Yeah. What's up? I asked, distracted by an invoice. She snipped, smiled, and said, Theo's in town. He's coming to my birthday. Be cool, or it's over. Snip. Like she was trimming my sanity. Now, a sane man would have asked questions. Who's Theo again? Why him? Why now? But see, when your wife drops the name of her ex like it's a +1 on an invite, your brain short circuits. I blinked, recalibrated, and finally said, I'll be very cool. My voice was so calm it scared even me. Sophie tilted her head, testing me like a science project. You sure? Absolutely, I said. Colder than a freezer sale in February. She laughed, thinking I was joking. I wasn't. The architect in me was already drafting emotional blueprints, stress load, tension lines, possible exits. Be cool, or it's over. A simple condition, like being told to juggle knives for love. Later that night, I sat on the couch, staring at Aurora's LED strip pulsing softly in rhythm with my anxiety. I thought about Theo, her ex, her once-upon-a-time heartache, the man who smelled like expensive cologne and emotional instability. I'd seen him once at a charity event years ago. The guy had cheekbones that could cut drywall and the smirk of someone who's never heard the word no. Sophie swore they were ancient history, a museum exhibit, closed for good. But now he was suddenly in town, like a sequel no one asked for. I tried to rationalize. Maybe she wanted closure. Maybe she wanted to prove something. To me, to herself, to the universe that thinks exes should remain theoretical. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about Theo. It was about control. Sophie's world runs on chaos management. My stability bores her. Her spontaneity terrifies me. We're like 2 apps that look compatible but crash when opened together. And yet, I loved her. Enough to plan a party, code a system, and pretend that be cool or it's over wasn't emotional terrorism wrapped in lipstick. That night, while she slept, I found myself measuring the kitchen island again, just to feel grounded. Tape out, pencil behind ear, whispering numbers like prayers. I told myself, you're fine. You're cool. You're precise. But the truth was, the man with the measure tape had just realized there are no exact dimensions for betrayal waiting to happen. You can measure a wall. You can calculate stress load. But you can't draft a blueprint for staying calm when your wife invites the ghost of relationships past to your house party. Still, I told myself I'd handle it. I'd host, smile, and be the architectural embodiment of chill. Because I'd made a promise, to her, to myself, and to the slightly judgmental smart system blinking softly in the corner. Aurora's lights glowed blue, almost like they knew what was coming. Machines, at least, understand structure. People? Not so much. I turned off the lights, set down the tape, and whispered to the dark. All right, Marcus. Be cool. Be very, very cool. You ever had someone throw a grenade at your sanity and call it communication? That was Sophie that Tuesday. The woman had a PhD in casual chaos. Theo's coming to my birthday. Be cool, or it's over, she'd said while clipping coupons for almond milk. No emotion. Just snip, snip, apocalypse. And like the idiot husband I am, I smiled and said, sure, babe. Because when your marriage starts sounding like an HR warning, you go into survival mode. I wasn't ready to die on Coupon Hill. Not yet. I tried to rationalize. Maybe she just wanted to prove to herself that she was over him. That she could coexist with Theo, the man who once wrote her a song called Sophie's Soulfire, and uploaded it to SoundCloud like the world needed more acoustic regret. Or maybe she wanted me to prove something. My chill, my composure, my emotional growth. Translation. She wanted to see if I'd melt down in front of people holding mojitos. But I'm an architect. Meltdowns are for weak structures and soft concrete. I'd been reinforced by caffeine, mild resentment, and 2 decades of quiet childhood disappointment. Still, that night I sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the half-eaten lasagna she'd reheated, thinking about all the ways I could screw this up. Theo wasn't just an ex, he was the ex. The guy who bought her a Vespa in college and crashed it into a farmer's market. The guy who found himself backpacking in Thailand and came home with a man bun and a tattoo that said breathe. Sophie used to talk about him like he was a comet, brilliant, fast, and likely to cause a mess on impact. And now the comet was back in orbit. Marcus, you're quiet, she said, sipping wine like it was a truth serum. Just processing, I said. Processing what? Geometry, I lied. Right? She said, smirking. You're mad. No, I said, I'm calculating. She laughed and said, you always think love is math. I smiled. And you always think math is optional. She rolled her eyes. Be cool, Marcus. It's just Theo. Just Theo. Like he was a harmless lab experiment instead of the human equivalent of a pop-up ad for poor decisions. I went to bed early, pretending I was fine. She stayed up watching Netflix with that faint smirk, the one she uses when she's planning chaos. I could practically hear her thinking, let's see if he can really handle this. Oh, I could handle it. But she wouldn't like the version of cool she was about to get. The next day at work, I told Ben, my best friend, office mate, and part-time therapist, about it. He dropped his pen like it was allergic to drama. Wait, he said, you're telling me your wife invited her ex to her birthday and told you to be cool or it's over? Bro, that's not an ultimatum. That's emotional CrossFit. Yeah, I said, rubbing my temples. I think I'm supposed to pass some kind of loyalty exam. You sure she's not setting you up for an episode of Marriage? The deleted scenes? Feels like it, I said. Ben leaned back, smirking. So, what's the plan, Mr. Architect? Build a bridge over your rage. No, I said, sipping bad office coffee. I'm going to host the best damn party she's ever seen. And I'm going to be calm. So calm, it'll disturb her. You're going to play psychological judo? Exactly, I said. Use her chaos against her. Ben chuckled. You're insane. I'm married, I corrected. By Thursday, Sophie was in full party mode. Hair appointments, nails, texts flying like confetti. I overheard her talking to her friend Alana on speaker. Yeah, he said he's fine with it. Totally calm. Like, weirdly calm. Alana laughed. Girl, that's not calm. That's volcano energy. Maybe, Sophie said, but he'll be cool. I know him. I smiled from the hallway like a man who knew she didn't know me at all. That night, I came home to find her trying on dresses in front. Friday night arrived with the kind of pressure you can't see but can definitely smell, like fresh paint and emotional tension. I'd spent the last 48 hours pretending to be zen while secretly plotting social survival. Aurora, my smart home system and borderline child substitute, hummed softly in pre-party readiness. Lights, check. Music, check. Airflow calibrated for optimal mingling comfort. Everything was set. Even the scent diffuser was working overtime, pumping cedar calm through the vents like I was trying to seduce an entire forest. By 7 p.m., my living room looked like a modern art exhibit titled Overcompensation in beige. I stood there in my dark blue shirt, sleeves rolled, confidence faked, thinking, if she wanted proof I could be cool, I might as well win an Oscar for it. Sophie floated downstairs 20 minutes late, wearing that red dress again, the one that could start arguments in church parking lots. She looked stunning, and also armed. Her perfume hit the air before her voice did. You ready? She asked. For what? I said, the party or the apocalypse. She smirked. Same difference. The doorbell rang like it had been waiting its whole life for drama. Guests trickled in. Ben showed up first, naturally. He was the kind of friend who knew when to bring snacks and when to bring sarcasm. He took one look at me and said, you look like a man pretending he's not waiting for his wife's sex. That's because I am, I said. Help yourself to the bourbon before I start biting electrical cords. Next came Maya, Sophie's college friend, dressed like she had a podcast about astrology and bad decisions. Oh my God, Marcus, this place looks amazing, she said. It's so curated. Thank you, I said, fighting the urge to bow. I used anxiety as my interior designer. The music was perfect, soft jazz giving way to indie pop, transitioning exactly on cue. Aurora was running smooth, like the obedient little algorithm it was. The guests laughed, clinked glasses, and complimented the lighting. How do you make the ceiling glow like that? Someone asked. It's called emotional compensation through LED, I said. They laughed, thinking I was joking. I wasn't. Then came Will, my coworker, the kind of guy who can't resist a dad joke. Man, this place looks like an HGTV fever dream, he said, handing me a bottle of whiskey. And I mean that in the best way. Thanks, I said. Wait till you see the synchronized candle sequence at dessert. You choreographed candles? Of course, I said. Doesn't everyone? The crowd thickened, and the vibe got louder. Sophie was glowing, laughing, greeting guests, taking selfies like she was running for office. She was in her element, adored, admired, and photographed. And for a while, I let myself believe we were okay. I was handing out drinks, playing host, cracking jokes. Ben was chatting up Maya. Will was telling some story about an HVAC disaster. And I, the man with the measure tape, was holding it together with duct-taped composure. Then, at exactly 9:07 p.m., because of course I checked, the doorbell rang again. The final guest. The one my stomach had been rehearsing for. Sophie's eyes flickered. Be cool, she mouthed. And like a well-trained robot, I smiled. Always, I said. I opened the door, and there he was, Theo. The myth. The legend. The walking cologne commercial. The guy had the audacity to look good. Crisp shirt, smug grin, hair doing the effortless, I just left a yacht thing. Marcus, he said, extending a hand. Man, it's been forever. Forever implies we've met more than once, I said, shaking his hand anyway. He laughed like I'd said something charming instead of slightly homicidal. Fair enough. Great setup you've got here. Thanks, I said. It's mostly steel, glass, and suppressed emotion. He handed me a bottle of red wine. Imported, expensive, and somehow passive-aggressive. Sophie appeared behind me, smile turned up to 11. Theo, she said, hugging him. And that hug lasted just a beat too long. I counted. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. 3. Too damn many Mississippis. I smiled like a man watching someone pet his dog without permission. Wow, you look amazing, Theo said to her. Red always was your color. Still is, she said. Marcus likes it too. I bet he does, Theo said. Sure, I replied. I love red. Especially when it's paired with restraint. Ben, standing behind me, coughed into his drink to hide a laugh. Theo strolled in like he'd been invited to the White House. He had that vibe of a guy who orders for everyone at restaurants and tips badly. He looked around, admiring my work. Man, this place is intense, he said. You always this detailed? Only when I care, I said. Then again, I've been told I overbuild things. Overbuild, he repeated. That's a good problem to have. Not if you're the one footing the bill, I said, smiling sharp enough to slice glass. Sophie introduced him around. Guests fawned. The room buzzed with the kind of energy that makes you want to check your blood pressure. I stayed near the bar, pretending to study drink ratios while actually timing interactions. Theo was charming in that I peaked at 28 way. He told travel stories, dropped humble brags like confetti, and laughed too loudly at his own jokes. At one point, I caught Sophie touching his arm lightly. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe it was choreography. Either way, I started stirring my drink like it owed me money. Maya sidled up next to me. So that's the infamous Theo, huh? Yup. He's tall. He's vertical, I said flatly. Impressive, huh? He's fine, she said, sipping her wine. But you? You're terrifyingly calm. It's unnerving. Good, I said. That's the goal. The night rolled on like a slow-motion parade of passive-aggressive smiles. At 9:45, the playlist shifted to the dance section. Sophie had requested it. Her moment. She grabbed Theo's hand to pull him toward the dance floor. He hesitated. I watched. Come on, she said. It's just one dance. The crowd cheered. Of course, they did. I sipped my bourbon, half human, half volcano. Then something remarkable happened. Aurora, sweet, loyal, AI Aurora, misread the decibel spike as an argument cue. It dimmed the lights to serious mood and switched the music to Claire de Lune. The room went quiet. Sophie froze mid-laugh, Theo mid-step. And I might have smiled a little too wide. Oops, I said, tapping my phone. System glitch. Happens sometimes when it senses tension. There's no tension. Sophie snapped. Of course not, I said. My mistake. People laughed awkwardly. Theo chuckled. You're a funny guy, Marcus. I'm professionally ironic, I said. Sophie shot me a glare that could melt rebar. I raised my glass and toasted the crowd. To love, technology, and flawless communication. Ben groaned quietly behind me. By 10 p.m., I'd hit my personal limit for emotional endurance. Theo was still talking. Sophie was still glowing. And I was one jazz chord away from spontaneous combustion. But damn it, I was cool. Ice cold. Antarctica with dimmers. I caught Ben's eye across the room. He mouthed, "You good?" I nodded. "Totally fine," I mouthed back. And somehow, I meant it. Because deep down, I knew something Sophie didn't. Every structure can handle only so much load before the cracks start showing. And tonight, she'd just handed me the blueprint for hers. The candles flickered. The guests laughed. And I stood there in my perfectly lit, emotionally fragile living room, sipping bourbon and thinking, the calm before the storm really does have great lighting. There's a specific kind of silence that hits right before a disaster, like the world's holding its breath, waiting to see if you'll embarrass yourself publicly. That was the silence that wrapped around me the moment Theo walked through my front door, hugged my wife, and held on a beat too long. You know when you can actually hear a hug. The faint shuffle of clothes, the deep exhale, the subtle, "I've missed this" energy? Yeah, I heard that. And because I'm a gentleman raised on sarcasm and repressed fury, I smiled through it like a damn saint. "Hey, man, glad you could make it," I said, voice all honey and homicide. "She's all yours, man. I was just leaving." The words came out smoother than whiskey and twice as dangerous. Now, I didn't plan to say that. It wasn't in my script. The line just appeared, like divine intervention from the patron saint of petty husbands. I saw Sophie's face freeze, that practiced hostess smile twitching like a faulty neon sign. The entire room paused. It was like someone hit mute on life. Then came the tiny sounds of chaos. A glass clinked, someone coughed, a phone camera accidentally clicked. Ben's eyes went wide from across the room, mouthing, "Dude, what the hell are you doing?" I didn't answer. I was too busy zipping up my jacket like a man clocking out of an emotional factory. See, Sophie had told me to be cool. And I was. Just not the flavor she'd ordered. She meant compliant cool, the kind that smiles while dying inside. I chose thermodynamic cool, absolute zero. The kind of cool that freezes the air. I'd promised to be calm, and in that moment, calm looked like surrender with a smirk. Sophie blinked at me, her mascara trembling with rage. "Marcus, what are you doing?" she whispered. "Leaving," I said simply. "You said you wanted me to be cool. I'm being so cool. I'm literally stepping outside." Theo chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "Hey man, don't take off on our account." I turned to him, smiling like a man about to make a toast. "Theo, buddy, I'm not taking off. I'm giving you space. You've clearly been waiting for this reunion longer than I have." Gasps. Literal gasps. You could feel the oxygen leaving the room, replaced by the scent of awkwardness and cheap cologne. Ben looked like he wanted to tackle me. Maya, bless her gossipy soul, was already texting someone. Sophie's lips pressed into a line so tight it could cut glass. "Marcus," she said in that low, trembling voice women use before either forgiving or killing you. "This isn't funny." "No," I said, picking up my jacket from the chair, "but it's honest. I'm giving you what you wanted, me not ruining your night." And then I did it. I put on my jacket like a man in a slow-motion movie scene, every button click echoing through the room. I even took a second to smooth the collar. Theatrics matter. "You guys enjoy," I said, heading toward the door. Drinks are free, the playlist's automatic, and the thermostat has a better sense of boundaries than I do. Ben stood halfway up, whispering, "Dude, wait." "Nah," I said, let her sparkle. Sophie followed me a few steps, heels clicking, voice trembling between anger and panic. "Marcus, don't you dare leave me with this." "With what?" I interrupted, turning back. "The consequence of your own chaos? Relax. I'm not storming off. I'm gracefully evacuating." "You're humiliating me," she hissed. "No, babe," I said, smiling gently. "I'm giving the audience what they came for, authenticity." Theo tried again, bless his overconfident soul. "Hey man, it's really not that serious. We're all adults here." "You're right," I said, stepping closer. "That's why I'm walking out instead of flipping the buffet table." He blinked, taken aback. "Okay, that's fair. Glad we agree," I said, patting his shoulder with the firm politeness of a man adjusting a painting slightly off-center. Then I turned back to the crowd, my guests, my curated chaos, and gave a short bow. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the evening. If anyone asks, tell them I finally learned how to let go. And with that, I left. The hallway outside was colder than I expected. My footsteps echoed, dramatic as hell, and honestly, it felt good. Not just good, liberating. Like unbuckling a seatbelt after a turbulence-filled flight. Inside, I could still hear muffled chatter, the low buzz of confusion, and Sophie's voice trying to salvage the night. I didn't feel guilt. I felt peace. Twisted, dark, satisfying peace. In the lobby, I leaned against the wall, exhaling. Ben texted almost immediately. Bro, what the actual hell? I replied, being cool, remember? He sent back 3 dots. Then, you are either a genius or divorced by Monday. I smirked. Why not both? I sat there for a bit, jacket half-zipped, watching people come and go. Some tenants passed me, nodding politely. Rough night, one old man asked, holding his dog's leash. You could say that, I said. Anniversary gone wrong. Birthday, I replied. Always worse, he said, shuffling off. I gave him a mental fist bump. Wisdom recognizes wisdom. I checked Aurora's system from my phone. Everything still ran perfectly. Lights were pulsing in perfect sync. Music still flowing. The party would go on, until I decided it wouldn't. Because if you think I'd let my wife's ex dance under my lighting design, you don't know me. So I sat there, smirking, and thumbed a little line of code I'd written weeks ago as a joke, quiet_mode.sh. A tap, a slide, and boom, Aurora began its silent protest. Inside, lights dimmed to funeral chic. Music hiccuped, faded, then died completely. What remained was awkward silence and LED white glare. Every insecurity under a spotlight. I didn't have to be there to see it. I could imagine the scene like a cinematic masterpiece. Sophie fuming, Theo pretending to fix the vibe, guests making excuses to leave early. Art really? My phone buzzed. Ben again. Dude, lights just went out. Did you? I texted back. System's sensitive to tension. Must have overloaded. You're insane, he replied. You love it, I wrote. A little, he admitted. A few minutes later, another text, this one from Sophie. Marcus, turn it back on now. Then another. This isn't funny. And a third. People are leaving. I stared at the screen, chuckled, and replied. You said be cool. I'm cool. Ice cold. She didn't answer. Instead, Aurora sent me an alert. Manual override attempt detected. I imagined her mashing the buttons, probably yelling at Theo for touching things wrong. Which, let's be honest, was on brand. I leaned back in the chair, grinning at my phone like a villain in a rom-com. Sometimes revenge doesn't need yelling. It just needs silence, bad lighting, and a well-timed exit. I didn't slash tires or throw punches. I just pulled the plug literally. After 10 minutes of lobby peace, I stood up, stretched, and walked out into the cool night air. The city hummed quietly, the way it does when everyone else is busy pretending they're fine. I wasn't pretending. For the first time in months, I was fine. Sophie's be cool ultimatum had turned into my emancipation. I found a little corner bar 2 blocks away, one of those places with sticky floors and beer prices that feel like time travel. The bartender looked up. Rough night, he asked. Nah, I said, sliding onto a stool. Just cooling off. He poured me a whiskey like he'd seen this movie before. Celebrating or surviving? Both, I said. Ben called, voice low but laughing. You're trending in our friend group, he said. Half think you snapped, half think you ascended. Let's go with ascended, I said. What's the damage? Party's dead, he said. Theo tried to fix the vibe, which made it worse. Sophie's furious. Maya's live tweeting it. We'll stole your hummus. He deserves it, I said. He's been through enough PowerPoint meetings to earn that hummus. You're unbelievable, Ben said, chuckling. What now? Now, I said, raising my glass. Now I enjoy my masterpiece. You can't buy moments like this, Ben. You engineer them. He laughed again. You're gonna regret this tomorrow. Maybe, I said. But tonight, I'm free. Free and hydrated. I hung up, took another sip, and thought about the irony. Architects are trained to build things that last. But sometimes, demolition is the most beautiful part of the process. And as I sat there, whiskey in hand, the faint glow of my phone still lighting up with angry messages, I couldn't help but smile. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting to Sophie's chaos. I was redesigning it. When I walked out of that apartment, I thought I'd made a clean escape, like the protagonist in a heist movie who slides into the getaway car before the credits roll. But apparently, my movie had a post-credit scene, and it involved Sophie Lane Reed having a meltdown in 4K. I didn't see it firsthand, but thanks to the miracle of text messages, panicked voicemails, and Ben's live commentary, I got a front row seat anyway. Ben was my informant. Every 5 minutes, another update buzzed through my phone like dispatches from a sinking ship. She's trying to fix the lights. Then, Theo's touching your control panel. Bro followed by, never mind, he broke something. And then finally, everyone's pretending to help, but also slowly leaving. It's like the Titanic, but with Costco wine. I sat in the lobby, feet up on a coffee table, scrolling through the chaos with the satisfaction of a man watching karma arrive on time. The building's soft ambient lighting flickered faintly from my command app, my beautiful, slightly vengeful creation, Aurora. When I'd built the system, I never imagined it would one day serve as the world's most polite revenge weapon. Yet here we were, smart home, dumb guests, poetic justice. I could picture it perfectly. Sophie, the self-proclaimed queen of social grace, trapped under the unflattering glow of harsh LED white. Her friends whispering, her ex awkwardly holding a wine glass like a peace offering, and that weird AI voice chiming out from the ceiling. Aurora has entered safe mode. Safe for who? Definitely not for her reputation. And the guests? Oh, I knew how guests behave when a party dies. They start doing the polite vanish. You know that move? The one where someone says, "We really should get going." And suddenly 15 other people discover they also have places to be? One couple pretends to have a babysitter waiting. Another claims their parking meter's about to expire even though we all live in the same building. Within minutes, the room empties faster than a buffet after the shrimp runs out. By the time Ben came down to the lobby to join me, the night had turned into a slow-motion implosion. He sat beside me, still holding a half-full drink. "You're an evil genius," he said. "I just witnessed social homicide." I grinned. "Oh, I know. Tell me everything." He leaned back, shaking his head. "So, first, Theo tries to play hero. He walks over to your control tablet like he knows what he's doing. He's poking buttons, saying stuff like, 'I do tech consulting sometimes.' Bro didn't even find the power button. Aurora started flashing, and then the thermostat jumped from 72 to 68. It was like watching a frat boy try to defuse a bomb. I snorted into my drink. And Sophie? "Oh man," he said, laughing. "She's pacing. She keeps saying, 'Marcus must have done this.' And everyone's like, 'No, no, it's just a glitch.' But you can see it in her eyes. She knows." I raised my glass. "To beautiful inevitability." Ben clinked his cup against mine. "You really are something else, you know that?" Most guys would have yelled. "Thrown something." "You weaponized interior design." "Precision, my friend," I said. "Revenge is best served on a dimmer." He laughed so hard he spilled a little whiskey. "You're gonna regret this tomorrow." "Nah," I said. "Regret requires doubt. I have none left." My phone buzzed again. Sophie. Voicemail this time. I put it on speaker, because why not share the entertainment? "Marcus." Her voice snapped through the speaker, shaky but furious. "Turn it back on. You're acting like a child. People are leaving. You've embarrassed me." She took a breath. "You always do this. You make everything about control. You don't even know how to let go." I ended the message with a tap and said, "Well, she's half right." Ben chuckled. "You're enjoying this too much." "Ben," I said, leaning back, "I've been married 6 years. I've earned this one night of unholy satisfaction." Then, because poetic timing is a real thing, the building's elevator dinged, and out stepped none other than Sophie herself. Red dress, heels in hand, makeup perfect except for one streak down her cheek that said mascara met meltdown. "Oh, this is gonna be good," Ben muttered. She spotted me instantly. "Marcus," she snapped, striding over. "What did you do?" I looked up calmly. "I followed your instructions. I was cool." "Cool," she said, voice rising. "You hijacked the entire party." I shrugged. "No, the party hijacked itself. I just rebalanced the power grid." She threw her hands up. "You're impossible. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Even Theo said it was childish." "Well," I said, finishing my drink, "if Theo's the moral compass, I think we're all lost." "Marcus," she hissed. You made me look insane. Oh, sweetheart, I said. You didn't need my help for that. Ben snorted so loud he had to pretend to cough. Sophie shot him a death glare. Do you mind? She said. Not at all, he said, raising his glass. I live for this kind of theater. She turned back to me, shaking her head. You're pathetic. You think this is funny. I stood, buttoning my jacket again for dramatic effect. Funny? No. Hilarious? Absolutely. She stepped closer. You think you've won something? No, I said. Winning would imply there was still a game. This is just credits rolling. That one landed. She froze, eyes blinking rapidly, like her brain was buffering. You're leaving me? She whispered. I sighed. Sophie, you told me to be cool, or it's over. I chose cool. Congratulations, we both got what we wanted. For a second, she looked like she might cry. Then she did that thing she always does, straightened her shoulders, and switched to performance mode. Fine, she said. If you want to walk away, walk away. Don't expect me to chase you. I won't, I said. Running shoes aren't my aesthetic. She stared at me for a beat, then spun on her heel and stormed out of the lobby, muttering something about emotional robots and therapy. Ben waited until the doors slammed shut before saying, You're really not going after her, huh? Nope. You sure? Ben, I built an entire smart home just to avoid surprises. I'm sure. He nodded slowly, sipping the last of his drink. Man, you just turned your marriage into a TED Talk on boundaries. Good, I said. Maybe I'll finally get an audience that listens. We sat there in silence for a bit, watching the building's reflection in the glass doors. The rain started, light at first, then steady. Somewhere above us, Aurora hummed quietly, back in standby mode. It was almost peaceful. Ben finally said, So what now? Now, I said, I go upstairs, grab my essentials, and check into a hotel. She can have the apartment for the night. Call it my final act of generosity. He nodded. You want me to come with? I smiled. Nah, go home to your wife. Tell her you witnessed a man finally get his PhD in detachment. Ben laughed, clapped my shoulder, and left. I waited a few more minutes before heading back upstairs. The hallway was quiet, eerily so. I opened the door to the apartment, and wow, it looked like a battlefield between pride and chaos. Half-empty wine glasses on every surface, balloons sagging in defeat, the faint smell of burned hors d'oeuvres hanging in the air. Aurora's voice chimed softly as I entered. Welcome back, Marcus. Would you like to resume party mode? No, I said. Let's retire party mode forever. Understood, it replied. I walked through the wreckage, surveying the remains. Sophie's friends had left their purses, scarves, and one lonely stiletto behind, like survivors fleeing a sinking cruise ship. On the counter sat the bottle of red wine Theo brought, unopened. Typical. Even his gifts were performative. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Theo himself. Hey man, no hard feelings. She was really upset. You two should talk. I stared at it for a full minute, then replied, Appreciate the concern. Maybe next time, stick to hugging your own date. He didn't answer. I started packing my essentials. Laptop, chargers, toiletries, a few shirts. The important stuff. As I zipped the bag, I noticed something on the counter, a birthday card. Not from me. The handwriting was too loopy, too sentimental. Inside, it said, You'll always be the spark that started my fire. Love, T. Of course. Theo had brought a card. Who the hell brings a love note to a married woman's birthday party? My first instinct was to tear it in half. My second was to frame it as evidence in future therapy. Instead, I left it right there on the counter. Let it sit like the rotten cherry on top of a melting sundae. Before I left, I poured myself one last drink from the bar cart, the bourbon I'd saved for the toast that never happened. I raised the glass toward the ceiling camera. Aurora, I said, play something for the end. Playlist selection? The AI asked. Anything poetic. A beat of silence, then the soft instrumental of Frank Sinatra's That's Life filled the empty room. I laughed out loud. Perfect. I sipped, looked around, and whispered, You did good, Marcus. You stayed cool. Walking out for the second time that night felt different. Earlier, it was defiance. Now, it was closure. No anger. No adrenaline. Just the sweet satisfaction of a man who finally realized that sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. I locked the door behind me, headed for the elevator, and didn't look back. The next morning, Ben texted me again. Newsflash, Theo left at midnight. Sophie's crying to her mom, and half the guests are gossiping in a group chat called That Party Though. You're basically a legend. I sent him a thumbs up emoji. Then, for good measure, a coffee cup. Because legends, apparently, need caffeine. Sitting in the hotel lobby, I replayed the night in my head. Every scene, every petty line, every small victory. And weirdly, I didn't feel proud or ashamed. I just felt done. Like a man who'd finally stopped trying to build a skyscraper out of someone else's chaos. Maybe the party lost power that night. But me? I finally switched mine back on. The morning after the great power outage of Sophie's birthday bash, my phone looked like it had survived a digital riot. 43 text messages, 12 missed calls, and an assortment of emojis that read like emotional Morse code. If drama had a font, it'd be bold, red, and all caps, and Sophie used every variation. My favorite message was time-stamped 2:14 a.m. You are cruel, you manipulative architect of misery. To which I replied at 6:03 a.m. Technically, yes, architect is my profession. The silence after that was delicious. By 9 a.m., the text had shifted tone, from furious to tragic. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Then, you humiliated Theo. Good. You made me look insane. Unnecessary effort on my part. Do you even care about what we had? Depends on the blueprint. Then the piece de resistance. I can't believe you weaponized a thermostat. I laughed so hard I spilled coffee on my shirt. The phrase, weaponized a thermostat, should have come with a copyright. I didn't reply again, not because I didn't want to, but because I had entered the most peaceful state known to man, postmarital apathy. That serene, untouchable calm where someone's rage bounces off you like hail on a steel roof. The kind of peace monks envy. Around 11 a.m., I decided to check in on Aurora's diagnostics because, well, engineers cope through maintenance. The system report said everything was fine. Party mode, completed. Emotional fallout, undetermined. Even my AI had learned sarcasm by proximity. Then came a call from Sophie's mom, Daria. The woman had the energy of a talk show host and the subtlety of an air horn. Marcus, honey, she began, voice dripping with guilt weapon butter. What did you do last night? I enforced silence, I said simply. I heard you shut the power off during her party. I shut the vibe off, I corrected. The power was just collateral damage. She sighed dramatically. You're both being ridiculous. You need to apologize. Why? Because marriage isn't about winning. No, I said, but it's definitely about not losing to Theo. She gasped like I'd used profanity in a church. That's not funny. Neither is hosting your ex in your marital home, I said, leaning back. But here we are. Daria muttered something about pride and immaturity, which I mentally translated to you hurt my daughter's ego. I let her monologue until she ran out of parental fuel. Marcus, she finally said, if you keep acting like this, she's going to do something drastic. Like what? Invite another ex to brunch. Click. She hung up. I took a long sip of coffee and muttered, worth it. The rest of the day unfolded like an experimental therapy session in detachment. I worked remotely from the hotel lounge, sketching designs for a mid-century office renovation. My brain was happy. Lines, proportions, symmetry, order. Unlike my marriage, blueprints never gaslight you. At 3 p.m., Ben showed up uninvited, which meant he was worried or bored. He plopped down beside me, holding 2 coffees. You look too calm, he said. That's suspicious. I'm fine, I said. No one who says, I'm fine in that tone is fine. I shrugged. I'm adjusting. He sipped his coffee. So she's blowing up your phone? Like a fireworks finale. And you're just ignoring it? Yep. Bold. Therapeutic. He leaned in. You realize this isn't over, right? She's gonna escalate. I chuckled. Ben, the only thing she can escalate at this point is her own imagination. You say that now, he said. But chaos loves company. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Sophie again. New message. I'm coming over. Ben grinned. Chaos RSVP'd. I stared at the text. Then typed. Not a good idea. She replied instantly. You can't stop me. I typed back. Aurora can. Ben snorted coffee out his nose. You're diabolical. Thank you, I said. I try. An hour later, the universe tested my patience. Sophie showed up at the hotel lobby, wearing oversized sunglasses like a celebrity who who'd just been canceled. She marched toward me like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. "We're talking," she declared. I gestured to the chair. "Proceed, Your Honor." She sat down with a sigh. "You think this is funny, don't you? I think it's poetic. You humiliated me. Correction. You hosted your ex at our home and humiliated yourself. I just provided lighting. God, you're impossible," she groaned. "Why do you always need to be right?" "It's not about being right," I said. "It's about refusing to be wronged in surround sound." She blinked, thrown off by my calm. "You've lost your mind." "No," I said. "I've found my peace." "Peace?" she scoffed. "You're sleeping in a hotel, Marcus." "Exactly," I said, sipping my drink. "Peace is a king-sized bed with no passive-aggressive snoring beside it." Her jaw dropped. "I can't believe you just said that. I can't believe I didn't say it sooner." She shook her head, exhaling sharply. "So that's it. You're done. I'm done being the project manager of your drama. You think you're perfect?" "Oh no," I said. "I'm insufferable, but at least I'm consistent." For a second, she didn't say anything. Her eyes softened, just slightly. "I didn't invite Theo to hurt you," she said quietly. "I just wanted to prove we could all be adults." I tilted my head. "You invited your ex who once proposed to you in a Chili's parking lot. That's not adulthood. That's nostalgia with bad lighting." She blinked back tears. "You make everything sound so cold." "That's because you confuse warmth with chaos," I said gently. "You think noise means life. I think silence means peace." She stared at me for a long time. "You really don't love me anymore, do you?" "I love you," I said. "I just stopped volunteering for the circus." The tears finally fell. And damn it, part of me wanted to reach across and comfort her. But the logical part reminded me that empathy was how this cycle restarted. So I sat still. I let her cry. After a while, she sniffed and said, "You're heartless." I smiled sadly. "No, Sophie. I just stopped letting you set the temperature." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, leaning forward, "for years, you controlled the emotional thermostat in this marriage. You decided when we were warm, when we were cold, when we boiled. Last night, I finally realized I could just turn the damn thing off." She looked away. "You're proud of that?" "I'm relieved." Her voice cracked. "So what, that's it? You want a divorce?" "I want my peace," I said. "If divorce is the invoice, I'll pay it." She stood abruptly, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but I'll regret it in quiet." She stormed off, heels clicking across the marble floor. People stared. I didn't care. I just sat there, breathing. Ben texted 2 minutes later. "She's gone." "Gone," I replied. "You okay?" "Better than the thermostat." That night, alone in the hotel room, I poured myself a drink and thought about her words. Heartless. Maybe she was right. But when you've spent years managing someone else's chaos, sometimes detachment feels like freedom, not cruelty. I picked up my phone and, for the first time all day, opened Aurora's app. The system's mood log still showed last night's chaos metrics, spikes in volume, temperature fluctuations, lighting anomalies. But under it, one line stood out. User override detected. Emotional climate stabilization. I laughed quietly. Even the algorithm was rooting for me. Still, there was a flicker of guilt. Sophie wasn't evil. She was just built for drama, and I was built for design. She saw life in fireworks. I saw it in floor plans. Somewhere along the way, we'd stopped building together. I just kept maintaining while she kept redecorating. At midnight, I texted her one last time. "We should talk." Calmly. No reply. Fair enough. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel and went home, not to reconcile, but to gather my things. The apartment was quiet, but not peaceful. It smelled like perfume and resentment. The counter was still covered in party debris, half-eaten cupcakes, a tipped-over champagne flute, and one lonely balloon clinging to the ceiling like a ghost of bad decisions. Aurora greeted me softly. "Welcome home, Marcus." Emotional readings, moderate tension detected. "Good eye," I said. There was a note on the table in Sophie's handwriting. "We need space. Don't contact me for a few days." Underneath it, she'd drawn a tiny red heart. "Old habits die hard." I smiled, folded the note, and slid it into my jacket pocket. Then, for no reason at all, I said to Aurora, "Set temperature to 72. "Would you like me to engage thermostat diplomacy?" it asked. I froze, laughing. "You remember that command?" "Affirmative." Thermostat diplomacy protocol. Emotional balance through incremental temperature shifts. Activated, I said, smiling. Engaged, it replied. The vents whispered softly, warm air spreading through the room. Gentle, steady, forgiving. And for the first time in a long time, I felt balance return. Not from Sophie, not from revenge, but from reclaiming control of my own atmosphere. Because the truth is, sometimes you don't win the war by burning bridges. You win it by adjusting the temperature until the other side realizes they were never built for the heat. The morning after the great power outage of Sophie's birthday bash, my phone looked like it had survived a digital riot. 43 text messages, 12 missed calls, and an assortment of emojis that read like emotional Morse code. If drama had a font, it'd be bold, red, and all caps, and Sophie used every variation. My favorite message was time-stamped 2:14 a.m. You are cruel, you manipulative architect of misery. To which I replied at 6:03 a.m. Technically, yes, architect is my profession. The silence after that was delicious. By 9 a.m., the text had shifted tone, from furious to tragic. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Then, you humiliated Theo. Good. You made me look insane. Unnecessary effort on my part. Do you even care about what we had? Depends on the blueprint. Then the piece de resistance. I can't believe you weaponized a thermostat. I laughed so hard I spilled coffee on my shirt. The phrase, weaponized a thermostat, should have come with a copyright. I didn't reply again, not because I didn't want to, but because I had entered the most peaceful state known to man, postmarital apathy. That serene, untouchable calm where someone's rage bounces off you like hail on a steel roof. The kind of peace monks envy. Around 11 a.m., I decided to check in on Aurora's diagnostics because, well, engineers cope through maintenance. The system report said everything was fine. Party mode, completed. Emotional fallout. Undetermined. Even my AI had learned sarcasm by proximity. Then came a call from Sophie's mom, Daria. The woman had the energy of a talk show host and the subtlety of an air horn. Marcus, honey, she began, voice dripping with guilt weapon butter. What did you do last night? I enforced silence, I said simply. I heard you shut the power off during her party. I shut the vibe off, I corrected. The power was just collateral damage. She sighed dramatically. You're both being ridiculous. You need to apologize. Why? Because marriage isn't about winning. No, I said, but it's definitely about not losing to Theo. She gasped like I'd used profanity in a church. That's not funny. Neither is hosting your ex in your marital home, I said, leaning back. But here we are. Daria muttered something about pride and immaturity, which I mentally translated to you hurt my daughter's ego. I let her monologue until she ran out of parental fuel. Marcus, she finally said, if you keep acting like this, she's going to do something drastic. Like what? Invite another ex to brunch. Click. She hung up. I took a long sip of coffee and muttered, worth it. The rest of the day unfolded like an experimental therapy session in detachment. I worked remotely from the hotel lounge, sketching designs for a mid-century office renovation. My brain was happy. Lines, proportions, symmetry, order. Unlike my marriage, blueprints never gaslight you. At 3 p.m., Ben showed up uninvited, which meant he was worried or bored. He plopped down beside me, holding 2 coffees. You look too calm, he said. That's suspicious. I'm fine, I said. No one who says, I'm fine in that tone is fine. I shrugged. I'm adjusting. He sipped his coffee. So she's blowing up your phone? Like a fireworks finale. And you're just ignoring it? Yep. Bold. Therapeutic. He leaned in. You realize this isn't over, right? She's gonna escalate. I chuckled. Ben, the only thing she can escalate at this point is her own imagination. You say that now, he said. But chaos loves company. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Sophie again. New message. I'm coming over. Ben grinned. Chaos RSVP'd. I stared at the text. Then typed. Not a good idea. She replied instantly. You can't stop me. I typed back. Aurora can. Ben snorted coffee out his nose. You're diabolical. Thank you, I said. I try. An hour later, the universe tested my patience. Sophie showed up at the hotel lobby, wearing oversized sunglasses like a celebrity who'd just been canceled. She marched toward me like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. "We're talking," she declared. I gestured to the chair. "Proceed, Your Honor." She sat down with a sigh. "You think this is funny, don't you? I think it's poetic. You humiliated me. Correction. You hosted your ex at our home and humiliated yourself. I just provided lighting. God, you're impossible," she groaned. "Why do you always need to be right?" "It's not about being right," I said. "It's about refusing to be wronged in surround sound." She blinked, thrown off by my calm. "You've lost your mind." "No," I said. "I've found my peace." "Peace?" she scoffed. "You're sleeping in a hotel, Marcus." "Exactly," I said, sipping my drink. "Peace is a king-sized bed with no passive-aggressive snoring beside it." Her jaw dropped. "I can't believe you just said that. I can't believe I didn't say it sooner." She shook her head, exhaling sharply. "So that's it. You're done. I'm done being the project manager of your drama. You think you're perfect?" "Oh no," I said. "I'm insufferable, but at least I'm consistent." For a second, she didn't say anything. Her eyes softened, just slightly. "I didn't invite Theo to hurt you," she said quietly. "I just wanted to prove we could all be adults." I tilted my head. "You invited your ex who once proposed to you in a Chili's parking lot. That's not adulthood. That's nostalgia with bad lighting." She blinked back tears. "You make everything sound so cold." "That's because you confuse warmth with chaos," I said gently. "You think noise means life. I think silence means peace." She stared at me for a long time. "You really don't love me anymore, do you?" "I love you," I said. "I just stopped volunteering for the circus." The tears finally fell. And damn it, part of me wanted to reach across and comfort her. But the logical part reminded me that empathy was how this cycle restarted. So I sat still. I let her cry. After a while, she sniffed and said, "You're heartless." I smiled sadly. "No, Sophie. I just stopped letting you set the temperature." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, leaning forward, "for years, you controlled the emotional thermostat in this marriage. You decided when we were warm, when we were cold, when we boiled. Last night, I finally realized I could just turn the damn thing off." She looked away. "You're proud of that." "I'm relieved." Her voice cracked. "So what, that's it? You want a divorce?" "I want my peace," I said. "If divorce is the invoice, I'll pay it." She stood abruptly, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but I'll regret it in quiet." She stormed off, heels clicking across the marble floor. People stared. I didn't care. I just sat there, breathing. Ben texted 2 minutes later. "She's gone." "Gone," I replied. "You okay?" "Better than the thermostat." That night, alone in the hotel room, I poured myself a drink and thought about her words. Heartless. Maybe she was right. But when you've spent years managing someone else's chaos, sometimes detachment feels like freedom, not cruelty. I picked up my phone and, for the first time all day, opened Aurora's app. The system's mood log still showed last night's chaos metrics, spikes in volume, temperature fluctuations, lighting anomalies. But under it, one line stood out. User override detected. Emotional climate stabilization. I laughed quietly. Even the algorithm was rooting for me. Still, there was a flicker of guilt. Sophie wasn't evil. She was just built for drama, and I was built for design. She saw life in fireworks. I saw it in floor plans. Somewhere along the way, we'd stopped building together. I just kept maintaining while she kept redecorating. At midnight, I texted her one last time. "We should talk." Calmly. No reply. Fair enough. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel and went home, not to reconcile, but to gather my things. The apartment was quiet, but not peaceful. It smelled like perfume and resentment. The counter was still covered in party debris, half-eaten cupcakes, a tipped-over champagne flute, and one lonely balloon clinging to the ceiling like a ghost of bad decisions. Aurora greeted me softly. "Welcome home, Marcus." Emotional readings, moderate tension detected. "Good eye," I said. There was a note on the table in Sophie's handwriting. "We need space. Don't contact me for a few days." Underneath it, she'd drawn a tiny red heart. "Old habits die hard." I smiled, folded the note, and slid it into my jacket pocket. Then, for no reason at all, I said to Aurora, "Set temperature to 72. "Would you like me to engage thermostat diplomacy?" it asked. I froze, laughing. "You remember that command?" "Affirmative." "Thermostat diplomacy protocol. Emotional balance through incremental temperature shifts. Activated, I said, smiling. Engaged, it replied. The vents whispered softly, warm air spreading through the room. Gentle, steady, forgiving. And for the first time in a long time, I felt balance return. Not from Sophie, not from revenge, but from reclaiming control of my own atmosphere. Because the truth is, sometimes you don't win the war by burning bridges. You win it by adjusting the temperature until the other side realizes they were never built for the heat. The morning after the great power outage of Sophie's birthday bash, my phone looked like it had survived a digital riot. 43 text messages, 12 missed calls, and an assortment of emojis that read like emotional Morse code. If drama had a font, it'd be bold, red, and all caps, and Sophie used every variation. My favorite message was time-stamped 2:14 a.m. You are cruel, you manipulative architect of misery. To which I replied at 6:03 a.m. Technically, yes, architect is my profession. The silence after that was delicious. By 9 a.m., the text had shifted tone, from furious to tragic. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Then, you humiliated Theo. Good. You made me look insane. Unnecessary effort on my part. Do you even care about what we had? Depends on the blueprint. Then the piece de resistance. I can't believe you weaponized a thermostat. I laughed so hard I spilled coffee on my shirt. The phrase, weaponized a thermostat, should have come with a copyright. I didn't reply again, not because I didn't want to, but because I had entered the most peaceful state known to man, postmarital apathy. That serene, untouchable calm where someone's rage bounces off you like hail on a steel roof. The kind of peace monks envy. Around 11 a.m., I decided to check in on Aurora's diagnostics because, well, engineers cope through maintenance. The system report said everything was fine. Party mode, completed. Emotional fallout, undetermined. Even my AI had learned sarcasm by proximity. Then came a call from Sophie's mom, Daria. The woman had the energy of a talk show host and the subtlety of an air horn. Marcus, honey, she began, voice dripping with guilt weapon butter. What did you do last night? I enforced silence, I said simply. I heard you shut the power off during her party. I shut the vibe off, I corrected. The power was just collateral damage. She sighed dramatically. You're both being ridiculous. You need to apologize. Why? Because marriage isn't about winning. No, I said, but it's definitely about not losing to Theo. She gasped like I'd used profanity in a church. That's not funny. Neither is hosting your ex in your marital home, I said, leaning back. But here we are. Daria muttered something about pride and immaturity, which I mentally translated to you hurt my daughter's ego. I let her monologue until she ran out of parental fuel. Marcus, she finally said, if you keep acting like this, she's going to do something drastic. Like what? Invite another ex to brunch. Click. She hung up. I took a long sip of coffee and muttered, worth it. The rest of the day unfolded like an experimental therapy session in detachment. I worked remotely from the hotel lounge, sketching designs for a mid-century office renovation. My brain was happy. Lines, proportions, symmetry, order. Unlike my marriage, blueprints never gaslight you. At 3 p.m., Ben showed up uninvited, which meant he was worried or bored. He plopped down beside me, holding 2 coffees. You look too calm, he said. That's suspicious. I'm fine, I said. No one who says, I'm fine in that tone is fine. I shrugged. I'm adjusting. He sipped his coffee. So she's blowing up your phone? Like a fireworks finale. And you're just ignoring it? Yep. Bold. Therapeutic. He leaned in. You realize this isn't over, right? She's gonna escalate. I chuckled. Ben, the only thing she can escalate at this point is her own imagination. You say that now, he said. But chaos loves company. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Sophie again. New message. I'm coming over. Ben grinned. Chaos RSVP'd. I stared at the text. Then typed. Not a good idea. She replied instantly. You can't stop me. I typed back. Aurora can. Ben snorted coffee out his nose. You're diabolical. Thank you, I said. I try. An hour later, the universe tested my patience. Sophie showed up at the hotel lobby, wearing oversized sunglasses like a celebrity who'd just been canceled. She marched toward me like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. We're talking, she declared. I gestured to the chair. Proceed, Your Honor. She sat down with a sigh. You think this is funny, don't you? I think it's poetic. You humiliated me. Correction. You hosted your ex at our home and humiliated yourself. I just provided lighting. God, you're impossible, she groaned. Why do you always need to be right? It's not about being right, I said. It's about refusing to be wronged in surround sound. She blinked, thrown off by my calm. You've lost your mind. No, I said. I've found my peace. Peace, she scoffed. You're sleeping in a hotel, Marcus. Exactly, I said, sipping my drink. Peace is a king-sized bed with no passive-aggressive snoring beside it. Her jaw dropped. I can't believe you just said that. I can't believe I didn't say it sooner. She shook her head, exhaling sharply. So that's it. You're done. I'm done being the project manager of your drama. You think you're perfect? Oh no, I said. I'm insufferable, but at least I'm consistent. For a second, she didn't say anything. Her eyes softened, just slightly. I didn't invite Theo to hurt you, she said quietly. I just wanted to prove we could all be adults. I tilted my head. You invited your ex who once proposed to you in a Chili's parking lot. That's not adulthood. That's nostalgia with bad lighting. She blinked back tears. You make everything sound so cold. That's because you confuse warmth with chaos, I said gently. You think noise means life. I think silence means peace. She stared at me for a long time. You really don't love me anymore, do you? I love you, I said. I just stopped volunteering for the circus. The tears finally fell. And damn it, part of me wanted to reach across and comfort her. But the logical part reminded me that empathy was how this cycle restarted. So I sat still. I let her cry. After a while, she sniffed and said, You're heartless. I smiled sadly. No, Sophie. I just stopped letting you set the temperature. She frowned. What does that mean? It means, I said, leaning forward. For years, you controlled the emotional thermostat in this marriage. You decided when we were warm, when we were cold, when we boiled. Last night, I finally realized I could just turn the damn thing off. She looked away. You're proud of that. I'm relieved. Her voice cracked. So what, that's it? You want a divorce? I want my peace, I said. If divorce is the invoice, I'll pay it. She stood abruptly, tears streaking down her cheeks. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said, but I'll regret it in quiet. She stormed off, heels clicking across the marble floor. People stared. I didn't care. I just sat there, breathing. Ben texted 2 minutes later. She's gone. Gone, I replied. You okay? Better than the thermostat. That night, alone in the hotel room, I poured myself a drink and thought about her words. Heartless. Maybe she was right. But when you've spent years managing someone else's chaos, sometimes detachment feels like freedom, not cruelty. I picked up my phone and, for the first time all day, opened Aurora's app. The system's mood log still showed last night's chaos metrics, spikes in volume, temperature fluctuations, lighting anomalies. But under it, one line stood out. User override detected. Emotional climate stabilization. I laughed quietly. Even the algorithm was rooting for me. Still, there was a flicker of guilt. Sophie wasn't evil. She was just built for drama, and I was built for design. She saw life in fireworks. I saw it in floor plans. Somewhere along the way, we'd stopped building together. I just kept maintaining while she kept redecorating. At midnight, I texted her one last time. We should talk. Calmly. No reply. Fair enough. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel and went home, not to reconcile, but to gather my things. The apartment was quiet, but not peaceful. It smelled like perfume and resentment. The counter was still covered in party debris, half-eaten cupcakes, a tipped-over champagne flute, and one lonely balloon clinging to the ceiling like a ghost of bad decisions. Aurora greeted me softly. Welcome home, Marcus. Emotional readings, moderate tension detected. Good eye, I said. There was a note on the table in Sophie's handwriting. We need space. Don't contact me for a few days. Underneath it, she'd drawn a tiny red heart. Old habits die hard. I smiled, folded the note, and slid it into my jacket pocket. Then, for no reason at all, I said to Aurora, set temperature to 72. Would you like me to engage thermostat diplomacy? It asked. I froze, laughing. You remember that command? Affirmative. Thermostat diplomacy protocol. Emotional balance through incremental temperature shifts. Activated, I said, smiling. Engaged, it replied. The vents whispered softly, warm air spreading through the room. Gentle, steady, forgiving. And for the first time in a long time, I felt balance return. Not from Sophie, not from revenge, but from reclaiming control of my own atmosphere. Because the truth is, sometimes you don't win the war by burning bridges. You win it by adjusting the temperature until the other side realizes they were never built for the heat. I've learned two things about heartbreak. One, it's quieter than people think, and two, nothing heals you faster than a printer spitting out legal forms. I woke up that Monday morning feeling like a man who'd survived a particularly bad hurricane. House still standing, but every chair crooked. Sophie hadn't texted in 2 days. Not "I miss you." Not "let's talk." Just radio silence. Which, frankly, was a miracle. I half expected her to send a singing telegram demanding closure. So, like any responsible adult processing emotional carnage, I made coffee, opened my laptop, and Googled how to file a notice to quit for joint tenants who think they own your soul. The internet, bless its pragmatic heart, delivered a checklist, a template, and the comforting realization that bureaucracy loves no one. Filling out those forms was oddly therapeutic. Line by line, date by date, my brain rewired itself from heartbreak to logistics. Address? Check. Leaseholder name? Mine. Reason for notice? Personal separation and tenancy revocation. Translation: you don't get to live rent-free in my emotional or physical square footage. The ink glided across the page like freedom wearing cologne. Ben called mid-form. You sound weirdly upbeat for a guy filing a breakup eviction. Because I'm not crying, I said. I'm notarizing. He whistled. That's darkly poetic. Everything's poetic when you're done being gaslit. So what's the plan? Serve her legally. Retrieve my stuff. Begin a new chapter titled, The Man Who Finally Read the Fine Print. You really gonna go through with it? Ben, I said, if she can invite Theo to my house, I can invite a process server to hers. The server I hired was a man named Todd, mid-40s, bald, the kind of guy who looked like he'd seen it all and still showed up early. He had this dry humor that felt like a mirror of mine. You sure about this, pal? He asked, flipping through the paperwork. I've never been sure, I said. You'd be surprised how often people change their minds halfway. Not this guy, I said, tapping my chest. This guy has receipts, backup copies, and a new hobby called peace. He nodded. Respect. Most folks get emotional. You're cold as marble. Architect, I said. We like our structures stable. He smirked. All right then, let's build you some closure. When he showed up at the apartment to serve Sophie, I stayed parked across the street, watching like a man auditing his own past. Todd walked up the steps, calm as ever, and knocked. She answered in a robe, hair in that messy bun she only wore when she was equal parts furious and unbothered. I couldn't hear the exchange, but I could see it. Her jaw tightening, the paper trembling in her hand, the slight stomp of her bare foot that said, "How dare you turn consequences into a postal delivery?" Todd came back, dusting off his hands like he'd just changed a tire. She signed, he said. Signed? Yeah. Right next to acknowledged receipt. She even underlined your name for emphasis. That tracks, I said. You want me to file the affidavit of service today? Absolutely. File it with gusto. He grinned. You're one chill dude, Marcus. I like your style. Thanks, I said. I'm running on caffeine and detachment. That night, I went home, not to stay, but to take inventory. I'd learned something valuable from that party debacle. Possession is 9/10 of survival. I wanted my things out before emotions turned into demolition tools. The apartment was oddly quiet. Aurora's sensors greeted me with a soft chime. Welcome home, Marcus. Environmental tension elevated. Noted, I muttered. I moved through the space like a ghost checking for haunting rights. My drafting desk, still there. My espresso machine, safe. My toolbox, missing. Classic. I found it later in the hallway closet under a pile of her yoga mats. Symbolic, really. Strength and structure buried under flexibility. Sophie emerged from the bedroom as I was unplugging my monitor. So it's true, she said flatly. You actually sent a process server. Consider it closure with a signature. You're unbelievable. I get that a lot lately. She crossed her arms. You didn't even give me a chance to talk. You had 6 years, I said, and an entire birthday party. That was one night. It was a thesis, I replied. She looked at the half-packed boxes. So what? You're just moving out. I'm moving on. You can't just erase me, Marcus. I paused, looking up at her. I'm not erasing you. I'm just removing you from the blueprints. The structure stands. You just don't get to live in it anymore. She laughed bitterly. You think you're so composed, don't you? Like this is all just business to you. It is, I said. Business with emotional zoning laws. Her voice cracked. I loved you, you know. I nodded slowly. And I believe you did. But love without respect is like a roof without support beams. It collapses under pressure. She wiped her eyes. You're quoting yourself now. Professionally, I said. She glared, stormed off, and slammed the door to the bedroom. Our bedroom, technically, though the word our was now pending legal review. Ben arrived 15 minutes later, carrying takeout and sarcasm. You sure this isn't an elaborate art installation? He asked, setting down the bags. Because it's giving divorce chic. I prefer mid-century detachment, I said, taping a box. He whistled low. Man, this is intense. Yeah, but it's progress. What's the next step? File notice, retrieve property, emotional bankruptcy. He grinned. And after that, therapy, bourbon, and possibly a houseplant. Sophie's voice called faintly from the bedroom. Ben, tell your friend he's insane. Ben looked at me. You want me to? Tell her the truth, I said. He raised his voice. He's not insane. He's architecting closure. She screamed back. That's not a thing. Ben shrugged. Guess it is now. After he left, I kept working. Packing can be spiritual if you do it right. Every object you touch asks you a question. Do I still serve a purpose? Or am I just emotional clutter? By midnight, I'd answered every question with ruthless efficiency. Before leaving, I did something uncharacteristic. I took one last walk through the apartment. I paused in each room, like saying goodbye to an old friend who'd been slowly turning into an enemy. The kitchen still smelled faintly of her perfume and burned toast. The living room held ghosts of laughter that now sounded rehearsed. The bedroom, well, let's just say the mattress was now a museum of misplaced loyalty. As I passed the thermostat, I couldn't resist one last act of symbolic revenge. Aurora, I said, set temperature to 62. Warning, it replied. This may cause discomfort. Exactly. The vents hummed, the air turned crisp, and I smiled. Goodbye, Sophie. I left that night feeling lighter. I'd taken the first step in reclaiming my peace, and it came with legally binding paperwork. There's something oddly empowering about choosing to be the adult in the breakup, even if you're the sarcastic kind of adult who jokes through the pain. The next morning, Sophie tried to retaliate. She called the building manager, claiming I'd abandoned the lease. Luckily, I'd anticipated that move. I sent him the notice to quit, copies of the payment receipts, and a polite reminder that my name alone was on the lease. He emailed back, all good. You're covered. Checkmate. But because the universe loves irony, Sophie wasn't done. She called me that evening, voice trembling with righteous fury. You're not going to make me look like the bad guy, she shouted. You don't need my help for that, I said. I'm serious, Marcus. I'll tell everyone you were abusive. Abusive? I repeated, genuinely stunned. Sophie, the most aggressive thing I've done this year is alphabetize the spice rack. You think this is a joke? She snapped. No, I said softly. I think it's the final act. She hung up, of course. That was her signature move. But this time, instead of shaking, I laughed. A full, stupid, liberating laugh that startled even me. Because I realized that's what happens when the person who once terrified you emotionally finally loses their power. They start performing for an audience that's left the theater. The next day, I met Todd again to finalize the filing. He looked up from his clipboard. Everything's official. 30-day countdown starts now. Perfect, I said. Feels weird, doesn't it? Turning love into paperwork. Yeah, I said. But at least the paperwork listens. When I got home, I found a single sticky note taped to the door. Sophie's handwriting again. You'll regret making me your enemy. I peeled it off, stuck it on my fridge, and wrote underneath. Already did. Now I'm making you my past. That night, I sat in the half-empty apartment with a beer, the sound of the city humming through the vents. For the first time in months, I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll old texts or reread fights disguised as conversations. I just sat there, breathing in the kind of silence that doesn't feel lonely, it feels earned. Because sometimes peace doesn't arrive as forgiveness. Sometimes it arrives as a notice, stamped, filed, and perfectly formatted. And if that's not closure, I don't know what is. There are few things more humbling than watching a police cruiser pull up in front of your old apartment while you're holding a cardboard box labeled Personal Dignity. It was 9:03 a.m. on a Wednesday, and I was about to participate in the most awkward social event imaginable, the civil standby. The concept's simple. Two officers watch while you retrieve your belongings from an ex who still thinks she's starring in a soap opera. Basically, it's divorce cosplay with badges. Ben was my designated sidekick, mostly because he'd begged to witness the chaos in its natural habitat. The man showed up with coffee and popcorn like we were attending a matinee. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked, handing me the cup. "Ready," I said. "Ben, I've been emotionally homeless for weeks. I'm just here to collect my coffee maker and what's left of my pride." We climbed out of the car, and the lead officer, Officer Hernandez, according to the name tag, approached us with the weary expression of someone who's seen too many domestic disputes and not enough donuts. "You're Mr. Reed?" she asked. "That's me," I said. "All right," she said. "You've got 30 minutes to retrieve your property. Stay calm. Don't engage in arguments. Don't touch each other. We're not therapists, we're referees." "Got it," I said. I promised to use only verbal sarcasm. She gave me the look of a woman who'd heard that before. "Let's go." We rode the elevator up, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the silence. My heart wasn't pounding, just steady, calm, like a man who'd already made peace with whatever spectacle waited behind that door. When the elevator doors opened, the scene did not disappoint. Sophie opened the door wearing my robe. And not just wearing it, thriving in it. Like it was couture. She had a mug in her hand and an expression that said, "You thought you'd seen Audacity before? Behold, the sequel." Behind her, Theo was sprawled on the couch, shirtless, like some kind of lounge lizard on vacation. His hair was messy, his confidence wasn't, and my once impeccably clean living room now looked like the set of an early 2000s music video. "Well," I said, smiling politely, "this is nostalgic in a horrifying way." Theo turned his head lazily. "Hey man," he said. "Didn't know you were coming by." "Really?" I said. "Because the part where I scheduled a police standby might have tipped you off." Sophie folded her arms, mug clutched like a prop. "You didn't need to bring the police. This is dramatic, even for you." Officer Hernandez stepped in, professional and unamused. "Ma'am, he's here to retrieve his property. You were informed of this." Sophie gave a tight smile. I didn't think he'd actually use the civil standby. "Well," I said, stepping inside. "You didn't think I'd leave either. We're both full of surprises." Theo stood up slowly, trying to look diplomatic. "Let's all just keep it cool, yeah? No need for hostility." I gestured to him with my coffee. "You're shirtless in another man's home, Theo. I think hostility's already on the menu." "Hey, I'm just trying to de-escalate." "Then maybe de-sit on my couch." The officer cleared her throat. "Let's keep this civil, gentlemen." "Of course," I said, smiling. "I'm all about civility. That's why I brought the law." I moved through the apartment methodically, checking off items on my mental list like I was shopping at the world's saddest IKEA. Laptop, check. Design tablet, check. My espresso machine, the altar of my sanity, still on the counter, gleaming like it missed me. "Come to Papa," I muttered, unplugging it carefully. Theo watched me pack with mild curiosity, like a tourist observing local customs. "You really labeling your boxes?" he asked. "I'm an architect," I said. "We label everything. Keeps chaos from pretending its personality." He chuckled. "You're intense, man. Better intense than unemployed and shirtless." "Okay, that's uncalled for." "Yeah," I said, "so was you." Sophie made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a growl. "You're unbelievable." "Thank you," I said cheerfully. "That's my LinkedIn tagline." Officer Hernandez stepped closer, clearly regretting every career choice that led her to this moment. "Mr. Reed, just focus on your items, please." I nodded, zipping another box. "Oh, I am. I'm laser-focused on my personal property and the smell of betrayal." I found my record collection next, half gone. "Sophie," I said without turning, "where are my vinyls?" She hesitated. Theo said he liked them. I looked over my shoulder, deadpan. "You gave my records to the human equivalent of elevator music?" Theo raised his hands. "Hey, I was going to give them back." Officer Hernandez stepped in again. "Ma'am, he's entitled to all items listed in the lease inventory." Sophie huffed. Fine. Take your stupid music. I smiled, sliding them back into the box. Thank you. My stupid music appreciates your generosity. As I worked, Ben quietly filmed the process, not to post, but to keep as insurance. Dude, he whispered, this is better than reality TV. You're killing it. I'm not killing it, I said. I'm documenting it. He nodded solemnly. That's even colder. By the time I reached the bedroom, I was halfway between exhaustion and amusement. Sophie stood in the doorway, blocking my path. You don't have to do this, she said softly. I paused. Yes, I do. Can't we just talk? We tried that, I said, setting another item into a box. You called me emotionally unavailable, then emotionally manipulative, then emotionally robotic. I'm running out of adjectives. She crossed her arms. You're still making jokes. It's either that or cry, and I'm all out of waterproof mascara. Her eyes softened for a second. I never meant to hurt you, Marcus. I met her gaze. But you did. Repeatedly. And at some point, intent stops matching. Theo, sensing emotional tension, stepped in like an unwanted ad pop-up. Hey, maybe I should. I cut him off. Yes, you should. Back up. Officer Hernandez looked ready to intervene again. I raised a hand. Relax, officer. I'm calm. This is calm. This is the gold standard of calm. Ben muttered. You're terrifying when you're calm. Thank you, I said. It's a skill. I loaded the last box and sealed it with the kind of finality you only get from heartbreak and good tape. All right, I said to the officer. I'm done. Theo shrugged. Guess this is goodbye, huh? Oh, Theo, I said, smiling. This was goodbye the moment you took your shirt off in my living room. Sophie looked like she wanted to slap me and hug me simultaneously. Instead, she said, you'll regret this. Maybe, I said, picking up the espresso machine. But at least I'll regret it in my own place. Officer Hernandez nodded to me. We're good here. Let's go. As I walked out, Sophie called after me, voice trembling with anger and pride. You think you've won? I stopped at the door, turned slightly, and said, No, Sophie. I just stopped playing. The elevator ride down was the quietest moment I'd had in weeks. Ben exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Bro, that was cinematic. Tragicomic, I corrected. A genre of its own. He laughed. You're either going to write a book about this or start a podcast. Maybe both, I said. Call it Blueprints for Boundaries. When we reached the lobby, Officer Hernandez gave me a polite nod. Good luck, Mr. Reed. Thanks, I said. I think I've finally built something stable. Ben and I loaded the boxes into the trunk of his car. He turned to me, still chuckling. Man, that guy was seriously shirtless at 9 a.m. What kind of confidence is that? The kind that comes from not paying rent, I said. We drove in silence for a while before he spoke again. So what now? I looked out the window at the passing cityscape. Now I rebuild. Without glitter. Without chaos. Just structure. He smirked. You gonna miss her? Every now and then, I said honestly. But only like you miss a firework. Bright, loud, and better admired from a distance. When we unloaded at my temporary apartment, Ben helped me carry the boxes up. My new place was smaller, quieter, undecorated. Just white walls and potential. I set the espresso machine on the counter like a sacred object. There, I said. Civilization restored. Ben handed me a bottle from one of the boxes. Found this. Scotch. Want me to stay? Nah, I said, smiling. Go home, man. You've done enough damage control. He nodded. You sure you're good? Yeah, I said. For the first time in a long time. After he left, I unpacked slowly, piece by piece, rebuilding my life from boxes labeled office, kitchen, memories I haven't decided on yet. Every item I placed felt like reclaiming a square inch of my identity. By nightfall, the place actually started to look like mine. I made coffee just for the symbolism. The first sip tasted like freedom, slightly bitter, perfectly earned. Aurora pinged on my phone with a notification, new device detected. Would you like to sync to existing profile? I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, no? Start fresh. It replied, welcome, Marcus. System initialized. I smiled. Clean slate. As I stood there, looking at the soft glow of my new lamp over the packed boxes, I realized something important. Closure isn't fireworks. It's not screaming matches or revenge victories. It's standing in your own quiet apartment, sipping bad coffee, and realizing the world didn't end. It just resized itself. And yeah, Theo might still be shirtless somewhere. Sophie might still be furious, but me? I was finally off the emotional grid. Unsubscribed from chaos. Rebuilding without glitter or drama. Just good lighting and peace. You ever think you've reached the end of the story, only for life to yell, plot twist, and hand you a court summons? That was my Tuesday. I woke up to an email from the county clerk's office confirming that my unlawful detainer case had been filed and that the defendant, my soon-to-be ex, Sophie, had been properly notified. It was the least romantic sentence I'd ever read, and somehow, it was also the most satisfying. I used to wake up to "Good morning, babe." Now it was case hashtag 4092-73 has been accepted for review. I'll take it. See, Sophie didn't leave. I gave her 30 days notice, and instead of packing, she went full squatter princess. She stayed in the apartment like it was her birthright, sipping my wine, using my Wi-Fi, and, I assume, rehearsing her sad victim monologue for her friends. Every day she stayed, my patience depreciated like a luxury car with bad mileage. When I confronted her over text, she wrote, "You can't evict me from my home. It's our home." I replied, "It's actually MY lease. You were the guest star." She didn't answer, which was fine, because the sheriff eventually would. The next few weeks turned into a waiting game. Legal paperwork moved slower than a toddler on a sugar crash. But I had a secret weapon, my attorney, Sharon Wells. Sharp, calm, and terrifying in heels. She specialized in property disputes and high-drama dissolutions, which sounded like she moonlighted as a therapist for the emotionally volatile. She looked at me over her glasses during our first meeting. "Mr. Reed," she said, "you've documented everything, yes?" I slid a folder across her desk. Receipts, messages, photos, system logs, even Aurora reports. Her eyebrows rose. "Aurora, my smart home system. It tracks environmental anomalies and user activity." She blinked, impressed, and maybe a little alarmed. "You're the first client I've had whose witness is a thermostat." "She's reliable," I said. Sharon smirked. "Then let's build you a case, Mr. Reed. Consider this your blueprint for peace." That line almost made me emotional. Almost. The hearing was scheduled for mid-October. Sophie didn't file a response, which legally meant she'd basically ghosted the court. Poetic, right? The same woman who loved confrontation suddenly discovered the art of avoidance. By the time Judgment Day rolled around, it was just me, Sharon, and the quiet hum of justice about to be served. That morning, I wore my best competent adult outfit, gray blazer, dark jeans, no tie. The kind of look that says, I measure stress in square footage. Sharon reviewed the paperwork as we waited in the hallway. Once we get the default judgment, the sheriff will issue a 5-day notice. She'll have that time to vacate voluntarily. And if she doesn't? I asked. Sharon smiled the way dentists do before they drill. Then she'll leave involuntarily. Inside the courtroom, it was anticlimactic in the best possible way. The judge glanced over the documents, asked a few questions, and then said, "Judgment for the plaintiff." That was it. Years of love, months of chaos, and now, 4 words and a gavel tap. Outside, Sharon handed me the paperwork. "Congratulations, Mr. Reed. You're officially the lawful occupant." I looked down at the stamped order. "It's not the victory I imagined." "That's because you're still human," she said. "Don't worry, that'll fade." I laughed, shook her hand, and drove straight to the sheriff's office to file the enforcement order. It felt bizarrely efficient, like I was checking off the final step in an emotional renovation project. Demolition, complete. Cleanup, pending. The deputies scheduled the eviction for Friday morning. I wasn't allowed to be there during the initial removal. They said it was for safety reasons. Translation: they didn't want me throwing sarcastic grenades while Sophie screamed about injustice. Fair. Friday came. I stood across the street again, just like I had the day the process server showed up, except this time there were uniforms, radios, and the kind of calm authority that even Sophie couldn't out-talk. 2 deputies walked in. 5 minutes later, I heard shouting through the glass. Then came the sound of furniture being moved. Not carefully, violently. I could see her through the window, flailing, yelling, throwing her hands around like an interpretive dance about denial. One deputy held the door while the other guided her out, still ranting. She looked furious, disheveled, and weirdly proud. "You're heartless, Marcus," she shouted from the sidewalk. "You ruined my life." I wanted to say something kind. something neutral. But instead, I said, that's rich coming from the woman who threw a birthday party for her ex in my house. The deputy shot me a warning look. I raised my hands. Just saying. She screamed one last line. Something about karma, and stormed off down the block, robe flapping like a cape of delusion. The deputies followed protocol, securing the property and handing me a new set of keys. One of them, a gray-haired officer named Jenkins, looked at me and said, "Congratulations. You're the proud owner of peace and probable damages." He wasn't wrong. When they left, I stepped inside, and it hit me like a punch to the chest. The apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt vandalized. Every room was a crime scene of spite. My leather sofa, sliced open down the middle like it had been auditioning for a mob movie. The coffee table, smashed. My drafting chair, missing a wheel, which I found lodged in the drywall like she'd thrown it. The kitchen sink was clogged, cemented, literally, with coffee grounds and something that smelled like vengeance. Aurora's voice came through faintly. System damage detected. Environmental distress at 92%. You and me both, pal, I muttered. I walked around in slow motion, taking in the destruction. The wall-mounted TV was shattered. My books, ripped apart and dumped in the bathtub. And the bathroom mirror? Written across in red lipstick. Hope it was worth it, psycho. I stared at the words for a long time, then laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly on brand for her. Dramatic handwriting, no punctuation, full commitment to victimhood. If Shakespeare had written petty vandalism, this would have been it. I grabbed my phone, snapped photos from every angle, and emailed them to Sharon. She called 5 minutes later. Jesus, she said. She really went for it. She's thorough, I said. I'll give her that. You'll need to file for damages, she said. We'll attach the evidence and pursue small claims. Shouldn't take long. Good, I said. I want this chapter ended in ink and judgment. Keep everything documented, she said. Don't clean yet. I looked around at the chaos. Oh, trust me, I wouldn't dream of depriving the court of this masterpiece. That weekend, I did what any self-respecting man does after emotional arson. I deep cleaned. I put on a playlist titled Post-Disaster Zen and got to work. Broken glass swept, trash bagged, floors scrubbed. It was oddly cathartic, like exorcising bad energy with Lysol and sarcasm. Every time I found something broken, I whispered, symbolic. By Sunday, the apartment looked like a minimalist showroom. Empty, clean, echoing. No more rose candles, or throw pillows, or chaos disguised as warmth. Just structure, simplicity me. The following week, I sat in small claims court, staring across the aisle at Sophie. She looked deflated, like someone who'd expected a movie climax and got a spreadsheet instead. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she tried for theatrics. He provoked me, she said. He emotionally abused me. The judge didn't flinch. Do you have evidence of that? Sophie blinked. He shut off the lights during my birthday party. The judge turned to me. Mr. Reed. Yes, Your Honor, I said. I also have footage of her inviting her ex-boyfriend to that same party, vandalizing my property afterward, and writing me a message in lipstick. Would you like to see it? Her lawyer cringed. The judge said dryly, please. I handed over the printed photos, the receipts, the Aurora logs. The judge flipped through them, expression neutral but clearly entertained. Did you really write hope it was worth it, psycho on his mirror, Miss Lane? Her face drained. That's not my handwriting. Really? The judge said. Because your Instagram from that same day shows you using the same shade of lipstick. Ben was in the back of the courtroom. I could hear him trying not to laugh. By the end of it, the judge ruled in my favor. $10,000 in damages. The number wasn't huge, but the validation? Immense. It wasn't about the money. It was about the acknowledgement that my sanity hadn't been imaginary. As we left, Sophie brushed past me, whispering, You think this makes you the hero? I smiled softly. No, Sophie. Just the survivor. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of scotch, the city glowing beneath me. The apartment was quiet again. No drama, no shouting, no soundtrack but the hum of the refrigerator. I'd finally reached the part of the story where silence wasn't punishment. It was peace. Aurora chimed softly from inside. Would you like to resume background music? I thought for a moment, then said, no. Let's enjoy the quiet. And for the first time in years, I did. There's something profoundly poetic about winning a lawsuit against someone who once swore they loved you forever. Forever, apparently, means until the damages are itemized. The morning of the hearing, I woke up feeling like a man about to defend his dissertation on the topic of emotional architecture and the physics of petty. My exhibit, a stack of receipts, a binder of photographs, and a smart home log file that could double as a witness testimony. If there were a Grammy for organized revenge, I'd be front row, tux pressed. The courtroom wasn't cinematic. It was beige, emotionally and literally. The walls, the chairs, the clerk's cardigan. Everything looked like it had given up on passion decades ago. Ben came with me, of course, claiming he wanted to observe justice in action. But really, he just wanted to see if Sophie would attempt another performance. He even brought popcorn, hidden in his briefcase like a toddler smuggling candy into a movie theater. When Sophie entered, the air changed. She looked composed, which for her meant she'd replaced rage with performative sadness. Hair perfectly straightened, lipstick a softer tone this time, subtle, remorseful, manipulative. She avoided my eyes, probably because she knew mine were busy drafting internal blueprints of satisfaction. The bailiff called our case, and just like that, the saga became state record. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Sharon Wells, my lawyer and my unofficial emotional bodyguard. Sharon had the calm of a surgeon and the empathy of a shark. Sophie sat opposite, flanked by her lawyer, a man with the defeated aura of someone paid in apologies. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a voice that could silence earthquakes, began, "Mr. Reed, Ms. Lane, we're here to address damages resulting from property destruction following an eviction. I've reviewed the documents. Let's start with evidence." Sharon slid the binder forward like it was a holy text. "Your Honor, Exhibit A, photographic documentation of vandalism consistent with retaliatory intent. Exhibit B, written note left by the defendant. Exhibit C, smart home data confirming no unauthorized access post-eviction, proving the damages occurred prior." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Smart home data?" Sharon smiled. "Yes, Your Honor. My client's system recorded environmental anomalies, motion, temperature, lighting. Think of it as an impartial roommate." The judge nodded slowly. "Proceed." On cue, Sharon handed her the printed screenshots from Aurora. Lines of timestamp data. Environmental anomaly detected, temperature spike. Unrecognized user movement detected in living room. Audio signature, high decibel yelling. I leaned toward Ben and whispered, "Even my house testifies better than she does." He almost choked on a popcorn kernel. Then came Sophie's turn. Her lawyer stood, buttoning his jacket with the energy of a man about to defend a broken toaster. "Your Honor," he said, "my client acknowledges emotional distress but denies malicious intent. The damages were incidental, the result of a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" the judge asked. She spray-painted his mirror. "It was lipstick," he said weakly. The judge glanced at me. "Lipstick?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "Shade. Blood of My Enemies by Estee Lauder." A laugh rippled through the courtroom. Even the clerk smiled. Sophie's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the desk. The judge sighed. "All right, let's get to the heart of it. Ms. Lane, did you write this note?" She held up the photo. "Hope it was worth it, psycho." Sophie's voice trembled. "I might have. I was upset." "Might have." Sophie bit her lip. "Okay, I did. Do you dispute causing the other damages listed?" She glanced at her lawyer, then at me. "I don't remember everything clearly. I couldn't help myself." "That's convenient. You should try vandalism with amnesia more often. It's very avant-garde." The judge shot me a look that said, "I like you, but shut up." I obeyed. Sharon closed her binder. "Your Honor, my client isn't here for vengeance. He's here for accountability. He's replaced the sofa, repaired the floors, and endured the cost of her destruction with the same precision he brings to his profession. He builds stability for a living. Yet Ms. Lane turned his home into an art installation about chaos. That was why I hired her. That, and her ability to weaponize adjectives." The judge nodded, flipping through the evidence again. "I see invoices, receipts, photographs, corroborating messages. It's quite thorough." Sharon smiled. "My client's middle name might as well be documentation." "Actually, it's Raymond," I whispered. The judge set down her pen. "Ms. Lane, you willfully damaged your ex-partner's property. This court awards Mr. Reed $10,000 in compensation. Boom. Gavel. Final. I felt something release inside me. Like pressure dropping after a long storm. Sophie looked pale, stunned. Her lawyer muttered something about appeals, but she barely heard him. When the session adjourned, she stood up and finally looked at me. "You think this makes you better than me?" she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "It makes me done with you." Her eyes glistened, not with remorse but indignation. "You ruined my reputation." "Sophie," I said, "you handed it to me pre-ruined. I just filed the paperwork." She turned away, muttering something about karma, and walked out, leaving the smell of expensive perfume and poor decisions behind her. Ben exhaled dramatically. "That was wow. 10 grand and poetic justice? You're basically Batman." Sharon smirked. "Batman still pays my retainer." Outside, sunlight hit my face, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. The air felt lighter, the city louder, but in a good way. I'd spent so long drowning in noise, arguments, accusations, anxiety, that actual silence felt alien. Beautiful, but unfamiliar. Ben and I went to celebrate the only way men know how, by pretending we weren't celebrating. We ended up at a diner that smelled like syrup and second chances. He ordered pancakes. I ordered black coffee and the quiet satisfaction of victory. "So," Ben said between bites, "what now?" "I start over." He grinned. "New city." "No. New mindset." "You gonna rebuild Aurora?" I thought about that. The system had been my pride, my symbol of control, but it also represented the old me, the guy who thought order could fix chaos. "Nah," I said finally. "I'm going analog." "Analog," he repeated. "Light switches. Dumb bulbs. Manual thermostat. No more automation. I want to live in a place that doesn't try to predict me." Ben raised his mug. "To dumb houses and smart men." I clinked mine against his. "I'll drink to that." When I got home that evening, the apartment was quiet, eerily so. No humming lights, no auto-adjusting ambience, no synthetic voice greeting me. Just me and the faint buzz of the fridge. I sat down on my new sofa, cheaper, smaller, but blissfully intact, and stared at the blank wall where my old smart display used to be. I didn't miss it. For the first time, I realized how peaceful uncurated silence could be. I didn't need Aurora to dim the lights for mood. I didn't need sensors to tell me when to relax. I could just exist. The next few days were strange in their simplicity. I went to work, met deadlines, laughed again. Real laughter, not the kind you fake to diffuse tension. I bought plants. Real ones, not self-watering ones. I even learned their names, Oscar the fern and Brenda the snake plant. They required minimal attention and never texted me at 3 a.m. Sophie tried one last time to reach out. An email this time. Subject line, "You won, okay?" Inside, "I hope you're happy. I'm not the monster you think I am." I stared at it for a long minute before typing back. Neither of us were monsters. We were just badly matched architects trying to live in the same blueprint. Then I hit send and archived the thread. No attachments. No dramatics. Just digital finality. Closure doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like coming home to a place you used to love and realizing you've outgrown it. A week later, I invited Ben over. He stood in the doorway, looking around. Wow. No tech. No chaos. Just walls. Feels good. Peaceful, I said. Feels like a museum of calm. Exactly what I was going for. He smirked. "You dating again?" I laughed. "Not yet. I'm still in a committed relationship with personal space." That night, after he left, I stood by the window, city lights blinking in the distance. The air conditioner hummed quietly, manual, imperfect, human. I made myself tea and thought about how everything had come full circle. From the man who measured life in millimeters to the man who finally stopped measuring altogether. I didn't rebuild Aurora, but I did keep one piece of it, the main light strip, now permanently disconnected. I turned it on by hand each night. The soft glow reminded me not of the chaos it once accompanied, but of the calm that followed. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about Sophie, not in anger, just curiosity. I wonder if she's happy, if Theo's still around, if she ever tells her version of the story at parties. I hope she does. Let her have her narrative. I've got mine, and it's quieter. Every morning now, I wake up to the sound of the kettle, not a robotic chime. I measure coffee, not emotions. I leave the blinds half open so sunlight decides when to enter. And I smile, not because life's perfect, but because it's finally mine. They say architects build to last, but maybe the secret is knowing when to demolish. Because peace, as it turns out, isn't found in what you construct. It's found in what you stop trying to rebuild. And so, I sit here, mug in hand, surrounded by stillness, realizing the truest thing I've ever built is the quiet after the storm. At my niece's birthday party, my wife's sister held down my 10-year-old daughter and chopped her hair off, so she wouldn't outshine her daughter. My wife said, "Don't make a scene." I didn't. I did this. The next day, they were crying at the police station. Look, I'm not saying all kids' birthday parties are a waste of time and frosting, but if you've ever walked into one and immediately felt your blood pressure spike while clowns juggle nearby, you know exactly what I'm talking about. My niece Emma's 10th birthday party was supposed to be one of those wholesome family gatherings where everyone smiles for Instagram and pretends their lives aren't held together with coffee and lies. Instead, it turned into the kind of event that makes you question whether humanity deserves nice things or if we should just go back to celebrating birthdays with a single candle and a firm handshake. I should have known something was off the moment I pulled into the driveway and saw the decorations. We're talking about balloons in every color of the rainbow, a banner that screamed Emma's magical day, in glitter letters that probably cost more than my car payment, and one of those inflatable bounce houses that looked like it could double as a small aircraft hangar. The whole setup screamed Pinterest mom on a mission. And let me tell you, those are the most dangerous moms of all. They're the ones who show up to school functions with homemade organic snacks and judge you for bringing store-bought cookies like you just committed a war crime. I was carrying a tray of cupcakes that my wife Lila had insisted we bring, even though I'd argued that showing up empty-handed would have been perfectly acceptable since we were already gifting Emma a bike that cost more than my first car. But no, apparently bringing food is some kind of unspoken rule in the suburban parent handbook that nobody bothered to give me when Zoe was born. My daughter was walking right beside me, and I've got to say, she looked absolutely perfect. Zoe had spent an hour that morning getting ready, which for a 10-year-old is basically the equivalent of preparing for the Met Gala. Her hair was done up in these long, gorgeous curls that cascaded down her back like she'd just stepped out of a shampoo commercial, and she was wearing this white dress with little flowers on it that made her look like an actual Disney princess. Not the knockoff kind you see at sketchy birthday party venues, but the real deal. She was polite, well-mannered, and radiating that innocent kid energy that makes you remember why you tolerate the chaos of parenthood in the first place. The party was already in full swing when we walked into the backyard, which had been transformed into what I can only describe as a carnival meets a sugar factory. There were at least 30 kids running around like they'd been injected with pure chaos, parents clustered in groups pretending to have conversations while secretly watching their kids like hawks to make sure nobody ended up in the emergency room, and a table loaded with enough junk food to send every dentist in a 10-mile radius into early retirement. I spotted my wife's sister Crystal almost immediately because she has this talent for making an entrance that screams, "Look at me," or else. She was wearing white jeans and a blouse that probably cost more than our monthly grocery budget, strutting around like she was hosting her own reality show called Mean Moms of Suburbia. Her daughter Emma was by her side, looking cute but nowhere near as put together as Zoe, which should have been my first warning sign that this day was about to go sideways faster than a shopping cart with a broken wheel. I did my social duty, smiled at people I barely knew, made small talk about the weather and how fast kids grow up these days, and generally played the role of pleasant family man at a kid's party that society expects you to perform. Zoe was having a great time, playing with her cousins and other kids, being her usual sweet self. And that's when the compliments started rolling in. One mom came up and gushed about how beautiful Zoe's hair was, asking what products we used like I had any clue about hair care beyond shampoo exists. Another parent commented on how well-behaved she was, and an aunt I barely recognized went on a 5-minute tangent about how Zoe looked like she belonged in a magazine. Normal stuff, right? Just people being nice to a kid at a party. Except Crystal was watching and listening, and I could see her face doing that thing where someone's trying to smile, but their eyes are telling a completely different story, like when you're at work and your boss says, "We're all a family here," right before announcing layoffs. Emma wasn't getting the same attention, and Crystal was taking mental notes like a detective building a case. I noticed her jaw tighten every time someone praised Zoe, saw her grip her wine glass a little harder, watched her force out these fake laughs that sounded like someone strangling a hyena. But hey, I figured she was an adult who could handle the fact that sometimes other kids get compliments at parties. I mean, Emma was the birthday girl. She was getting plenty of attention. This wasn't a competition. Turns out, I was wrong. Dead wrong. Competition show on cable television wrong. About 10 minutes after the compliment parade, I was standing by the food table, debating whether eating a fourth mini hot dog would be socially acceptable or cross the line into concerning dad behavior, when I heard Zoe call out, "Aunt Crystal," in that confused, slightly worried voice that every parent knows means something's not right. I turned around just in time to see Crystal kneeling down behind Zoe, holding her by the shoulders with one hand, and in the other hand, I kid you not, she had a pair of those rounded safety scissors that kindergartners use for construction paper projects. Before I could even process what was happening, before my brain could catch up with my eyes, Crystal started cutting, just hacking away at Zoe's beautiful curls like she was trimming a hedge that had personally offended her family. The backyard went quiet. Not movie quiet, but that real-life quiet where everyone stops talking at exactly the same moment, because something so bizarre is happening that human brains need a second to reboot. I watched chunks of my daughter's hair fall to the ground in slow motion, saw Zoe's face go from confusion to shock to the kind of hurt that makes your chest feel like someone's squeezing it in a vice. Other parents were frozen, mouths open, nobody quite sure if this was some weird party game or if they were witnessing an actual crime being committed at a children's birthday party. I dropped my plate. I think I stopped breathing for a second. My legs moved before my brain gave them permission, and I was across that yard faster than I've moved since high school gym class. I pulled Zoe away from Crystal, who had this wild look in her eyes like she'd just woken up from sleepwalking and wasn't quite sure how she got there. My daughter was crying, touching the jagged, uneven mess that used to be her hair, and I felt this rage building up inside me like a volcano that had been dormant for years and just remembered it was supposed to be erupting. That's when Lila appeared next to me, her hand on my arm, her voice low and urgent in my ear. "Marcus, don't make a scene. Please. Not here. Not now." She was looking at me with those eyes that said she knew exactly what I was thinking, knew I was about 2 seconds away from turning this birthday party into something that would require police intervention and probably therapy for multiple children. Crystal was stammering something about just evening it out and didn't mean to, while her husband Doug stood there looking like he wished the earth would open up and swallow him whole. I looked at my daughter's tear-streaked face, at the hair scattered on the grass like evidence at a crime scene, at Crystal's fake apologetic expression that wouldn't fool a parking meter, and at Lila pleading with me silently to just let it go, to be the bigger person, to not ruin everyone's day. And you know what I did? I took a deep breath. I wiped Zoe's tears with my thumb. I smiled. Actually smiled. Walked over to the food table, picked up a cupcake with pink frosting, and ate it slowly while everyone watched me like I was a bomb that hadn't decided whether to explode yet. "Great party, Crystal," I said, my voice so calm it scared me a little. "Really memorable." Then I took Zoe's hand, told Lila we were leaving, and walked out of that backyard with my head high and my heart racing. Because here's the thing about making a scene that nobody tells you. Sometimes the scariest thing you can do isn't losing your temper. It's keeping it. It's staying quiet while everyone expects you to explode. It's smiling while mentally drafting a police report that's going to make their next few months very, very interesting. I didn't make a scene that day, but I was absolutely going to make a case. The car ride home was the kind of quiet that makes you wish someone would just scream and get it over with. Zoe sat in the back seat, staring out the window with her hand touching what was left of her hair every few seconds, like she kept hoping it would magically grow back if she checked enough times. Lila was in the passenger seat doing that thing where she pretends to look at her phone, but is actually trying to figure out how to spin a disaster into something manageable, which is basically her superpower as a PR manager. Me? I was gripping the steering wheel so hard I'm pretty sure I left permanent fingerprints in the leather, driving exactly the speed limit because the last thing I needed was to get pulled over while looking like I was planning someone's demise. Which, let's be honest, I absolutely was. We got home and Zoe went straight to her room without saying a word. Didn't ask for a snack, didn't turn on the TV, didn't do any of the normal after-party routine stuff that kids do. She just walked upstairs with her shoulders hunched like she was carrying the weight of every bad haircut in human history, and closed her door with this soft click that somehow hurt worse than if she'd slammed it. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening to the sound of my 10-year-old daughter crying, and I felt something inside me shift. You know that moment in movies where the hero realizes they can't just walk away from injustice anymore? Yeah, it was like that. Except instead of dramatic music, there was just the hum of our refrigerator and Lila behind me saying we needed to talk. We ended up in the kitchen, which is apparently the designated battlefield for every serious marital discussion in American households. Lila started making tea, which should have been my first warning sign because she only makes tea when she's about to say something she knows I won't like and needs her hands busy so she doesn't have to make eye contact. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, waiting for whatever rationalization was about to come my way. Marcus, she started, and I already knew I was going to hate the next sentence. It's just hair. It'll grow back. Just hair. Just hair. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from saying something I'd regret, because let me tell you, comparing my daughter's traumatic assault by scissors to a simple bad haircut was like saying the Titanic had a minor leak. But I didn't explode. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her with this expression that must have been pretty intense because she actually took a step back. You're right, I said, my voice so level it could have been used by construction workers to hang pictures. It's just hair. And Mount Vesuvius was just steam. The Hindenburg was just a little spark. The Titanic just needed a better GPS. Don't be dramatic, Lila said. But her voice had that edge to it that told me she knew she'd stepped in it. I'm not saying what Crystal did was okay. Obviously it wasn't. But making this into some huge thing isn't going to help Zoe. She needs us to show her it's not a big deal, so she doesn't develop some kind of complex about it. I stared at her like she'd just suggested we solve world hunger by telling everyone to stop being hungry. Not a big deal. Lila, your sister held our daughter down and cut off her hair at a birthday party in front of 30 people because she was jealous. That's not a parenting disagreement or a difference in discipline styles. That's assault. That's the kind of thing that shows up on police reports and therapy bills. She waved her hand like she was swatting away my concern along with an annoying fly. Police reports? Marcus, she's family. You can't seriously be thinking about involving the police over a haircut. Watch me, I said, and I meant it. But here's the thing about being married for 12 years. You learn when to pick your battles and when to just shut up and let your actions speak louder than any argument could. So I didn't say anything else. I just nodded, kissed her on the forehead like we'd reached some kind of understanding, and went upstairs to check on Zoe. My daughter was lying on her bed, face down in her pillow, and the sound of her crying made my heart feel like someone was squeezing it with pliers. I sat down on the edge of her bed and put my hand on her back, feeling her little shoulders shake with each sob. What do you even say in that moment? Every dad joke and piece of fatherly wisdom in my arsenal felt completely useless against the reality that someone had hurt my kid and I hadn't been able to stop it. She finally turned over and looked at me with those red, puffy eyes that made me want to drive back to Crystal's house and have a very different kind of conversation than the one we'd had in her backyard. Half of her hair was gone, and I mean gone. Not styled short, not cut into some trendy bob, but literally hacked off in jagged chunks like Crystal had been using those safety scissors blindfolded during an earthquake. The other half was still relatively intact, which somehow made it worse because it showed exactly what had been taken from her. Dad, she whispered, her voice cracking. Why did Aunt Crystal do that? I didn't do anything wrong. I was just standing there. And there it was. The question every parent dreads because the real answer is too dark and complicated for a 10-year-old to process. I couldn't tell her that her aunt was a narcissist who couldn't handle her own daughter not being the center of attention. I couldn't explain that some adults are basically children in expensive clothing who never learned to manage their emotions. I couldn't say that jealousy makes people do terrible things, and sometimes family members are the worst offenders because they feel entitled to get away with it. So I did what every parent does in that situation. I lied my ass off with the most comforting version of the truth I could manufacture. Sweetheart, some people have stuff going on inside them that makes them act in ways that don't make sense to normal people. It had nothing to do with you. You were perfect. You are perfect. She's just dealing with things badly. I brushed a strand of hair away from her face, careful not to touch the butchered side. But I promise you, and I mean really promise you, this isn't going to go unanswered. Okay. She nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve like the proper 10-year-old she was. Mom said it's just hair, and I shouldn't be upset. Of course she did. I took a deep breath and counted to 5 in my head. Your mom is trying to make you feel better. But you know what? It's okay to be upset. Someone did something mean to you, and you're allowed to have feelings about it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I stayed with her until she fell asleep, which took about 2 hours and involved reading 3 chapters of her current favorite book about dragons and teenage wizards. When I finally crept out of her room, it was almost 11 at night, and I was exhausted in that bone-deep way that comes from emotional turmoil rather than physical activity. Lila was already in bed, scrolling through her phone with that glazed expression that means she's avoiding thinking about real problems by looking at other people's fake perfect lives on social media. I went downstairs, poured myself a glass of water because I'm not much of a drinker and also needed to keep a clear head, and sat down at the kitchen table with my phone. That's when I decided to check Facebook, mostly because I had this nagging feeling that Crystal wasn't done being terrible for the day. And sure enough, there it was, posted about an hour ago. A selfie of Crystal looking all zen and peaceful with a caption that made my blood pressure spike so fast I'm surprised I didn't stroke out right there at my kitchen table. Kids gotta learn not to compete with others. Sometimes the best lessons come from unexpected moments. #blessed, #motherhood, #real talk. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from stress. This woman had just assaulted my daughter and was now posting philosophical garbage on social media like she was some kind of parenting guru who just imparted wisdom instead of trauma. The comments were already rolling in from people who had no idea what had actually happened, all agreeing with her about teaching kids humility and not letting them get big heads. My finger hovered over the comment section. I wanted to reply so badly. I had about 15 different responses drafted in my head, each one more scathing than the last. But then I remembered something my grandfather used to say. Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. Crystal was building my case for me, documenting her crazy in real time with a timestamp and everything. So instead of commenting, I took screenshots. Multiple ones. From different angles. I saved the post, saved the comments, saved everything. I even used one of those internet archive sites to make sure she couldn't delete it later and claim it never happened. Every piece of evidence carefully filed away like I was building a legal case, which, spoiler alert, I absolutely was. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else, which is my usual routine, but felt especially important that day. I needed to clear my head, needed to think, needed to plan. I made coffee, the good stuff, not the watered-down garbage Lila prefers, and stood at the kitchen window watching the sun come up over our suburban neighborhood, where apparently assault is considered teaching moments. When Zoe came downstairs around 7, still in her pajamas with her destroyed hair sticking up at weird angles, I was ready. I'd made her favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse, because I'm a dad who can't draw anything more complicated than Disney characters, and had her chocolate milk already poured. She climbed onto the stool at the kitchen island and gave me this small, sad smile that broke my heart all over again. I put the plate in front of her, sat down across from her, and looked her straight in the eyes. "Sweetheart, I need you to know something," I said. "What happened yesterday was wrong. What Aunt Crystal did was wrong. And I promise you, and this is a Marcus Mitchell guarantee, which you know is better than any warranty at Best Buy, some people's karma just takes the scenic route. It might not happen today or tomorrow, but it's coming. Trust me." She nodded, taking a bite of pancake, and I saw something shift in her expression. A little bit of hope creeping back in, and I meant every word. Because while Lila might have wanted to sweep this under the rug and pretend we were all one big happy family, I was already 3 steps into a plan that would make Crystal regret ever picking up those scissors. Karma wasn't taking the scenic route. I was putting it on the express lane. There's this thing that happens when you're truly, deeply angry that most people don't understand. It's not the loud, explosive rage you see in movies where guys punch walls and flip tables while dramatic music plays. That's amateur hour, the kind of anger that burns out fast and leaves you with nothing but broken knuckles and regret. No, real anger, the kind that actually accomplishes something, is cold. It's calculated. It's the kind of fury that makes you wake up at 5 in the morning with a clear head and a to-do list that reads like a legal thriller. That's where I was living now, in this weird Zen state of complete calm that was apparently freaking out everyone around me more than if I'd actually lost my mind at the party. Lila kept watching me like I was a bomb with a faulty timer, waiting for me to explode at any moment. She'd ask me how I was doing with this overly careful voice, like she was negotiating with a hostage taker, and I'd just smile and say, "Fine, honey," while internally organizing my growing collection of evidence into color-coded folders on my laptop. My coworkers noticed too. My buddy Jake from accounting asked me at lunch if everything was okay because apparently I was being weird, which I took to mean I wasn't complaining about my usual stuff like traffic and the guy who keeps microwaving fish in the break room. "I'm great," I told him, taking a bite of my sandwich with the kind of calm that probably looked psychotic. "Never better." He didn't look convinced, but he also didn't push it, which was smart because I was about 3 questions away from showing him my evidence spreadsheet, and nobody needs to see that level of organizational vengeance during their lunch break. The truth was, I'd spent the last 3 days doing what I do best, turning my obsessive attention to detail into a weapon of mass documentation. See, my day job is in project management, which basically means I'm professionally trained to break down complex situations into manageable tasks, track progress, and make sure everything is documented in triplicate. Most people use these skills to manage construction timelines or software rollouts. I was using mine to build a case against my sister-in-law that would make prosecutors weep with joy. I started with the basics. I went through my phone and found every photo and video from the party. Turns out, in the age of smartphones, there's no such thing as an undocumented assault. Someone's always filming, usually for Instagram stories they'll forget about in 24 hours. I had 3 different angles of the haircutting incident, including one from Uncle Vernon, who'd been recording the whole thing while somehow simultaneously eating barbecue chips. You could literally hear the crunching in the audio, which would have been hilarious if the content wasn't my daughter getting attacked by a grown woman with safety scissors. I made copies. Then I made copies of the copies. I uploaded everything to 3 different cloud services because I've seen enough legal dramas to know that evidence has a weird habit of disappearing when it's inconvenient for certain people. I created a timeline with timestamps for every event, from when we arrived at the party to when Crystal made her move to when we left. I even included the weather report from that day because, honestly, I was getting carried away and kind of enjoying it. Then came the witness list. I made a spreadsheet because of course I did, with the name of every adult who'd been at that party. Next to each name, I noted what they'd seen, whether they'd said anything about it afterward, and their contact information. I had 17 potential witnesses, including 2 who'd actually gasped out loud when Crystal started cutting, which I noted in a separate column labeled Visible Reactions. My attention to detail was approaching serial killer levels, except instead of planning a crime, I was documenting one that had already happened. The screenshots from Crystal's social media deserve their own folder. I didn't just save her "kids gotta learn" post. I went back through her entire Facebook history like I was researching for a documentary about terrible people. Turns out, this wasn't her first rodeo with crazy behavior. There were posts about her feuds with other parents at Emma's school, passive-aggressive comments about people who think their kids are special, and a concerning number of wine memes that suggested she had some issues with impulse control and alcohol. I documented everything, cross-referenced dates, and even found a post from 2 months ago where she'd complained about Zoe getting the lead in the school play over Emma. Pattern of behavior, ladies and gentlemen. That's what lawyers call it. And I was building a greatest hits album. Meanwhile, Crystal was apparently living her best life, completely oblivious to the storm I was quietly brewing in my home office. She kept posting on Facebook like nothing had happened, sharing recipes and motivational quotes about being a boss mom and living authentically. The family group chat, which I'd muted after the party but still checked religiously, was blowing up with her commentary on everything from politics to the proper way to organize a pantry. Then, about 4 days after the incident, she posted something that almost made me laugh out loud. It was one of those inspiration porn images with a sunset background and text that read, "Some people can't handle seeing others shine. That's their problem, not yours. Stay blessed." The lack of self-awareness was so profound I had to read it twice to make sure it was real. I was sitting at my desk at work when I saw it, and I actually felt my face do this thing where I couldn't tell if I was smiling or grimacing. My finger hovered over the comment section for a solid 30 seconds. I wanted to write something. Oh man, did I want to write something. I had about 47 different responses in my head, each one more savage than the last. Hey Crystal, does this apply to people who assault children? Or interesting philosophy from someone who can't handle a 10-year-old getting compliments? Or simply LOL. But then I remembered my strategy. Stay calm. Stay quiet. Let her keep talking. Every post she made was another exhibit for my case. Another example of her complete lack of remorse or understanding of what she'd done. So instead of commenting, I did something that I knew would mess with her head way more than any confrontation would. I reacted with a thumbs up emoji. That's it. Just a simple, innocuous thumbs up that could mean anything from I agree to I acknowledge your existence to I'm watching you, and you have no idea what's coming. The beauty of the thumbs up is its ambiguity. It's the Switzerland of emoji responses, technically neutral but somehow vaguely threatening when used in the right context. Within 5 minutes, my phone buzzed with a text from Lila. Did you seriously just like Crystal's post? It's a thumbs up, not a like, I texted back. I'm being supportive of her journey towards self-awareness. Marcus. What? I'm staying calm like you wanted. Look at me, not making a scene. She didn't respond, which told me she knew exactly what I was doing but couldn't quite articulate why it bothered her so much. That was the thing about my new approach. It was technically what everyone wanted. I wasn't yelling, wasn't making dramatic gestures, wasn't sending angry messages or confronting Crystal in parking lots. I was being the picture of restraint and maturity. The fact that I was simultaneously building a legal case that could result in criminal charges was just a bonus that I kept to myself. The family group chat started getting interesting after that. Crystal would post something, usually some humble brag about Emma or a passive-aggressive observation about parenting, and I'd respond with a thumbs up. Every single time. My mother-in-law would share a recipe, thumbs up. My brother-in-law would post a photo of his new truck, thumbs up. Crystal would comment about how some people need to learn boundaries, and I'd hit her with that thumbs up so fast my phone probably got whiplash. It was driving them crazy. I could tell because the messages started getting weirder, more pointed, like they were trying to get a rise out of me. Crystal posted about how families should stick together through misunderstandings, and I gave her a thumbs up with the enthusiasm of a man who'd just finished filing a police report, which, spoiler alert, was exactly what I was planning to do. Uncle Vernon called me one evening, which was unusual because we usually only talked at family events while discussing sports or grilling techniques. Marcus, buddy, you doing okay? Your wife's worried about you. Never better, I said, sitting in my garage, my thinking cave, as I'd started calling it, surrounded by printed documents and highlighted legal statutes. Just been busy with work. It's just the whole thing with Crystal and Zoe. That was messed up, man. Yeah, it was. I agreed, my voice neutral as Switzerland. Really messed up. So you're not mad? Oh, I'm furious, I said cheerfully. But being mad and screaming doesn't change anything. Action does. Hey, quick question. You still have that video you took at the party? Oh yeah? You want me to send it to you? If you don't mind. Just want to have a copy for Zoe when she's older. You know, memories. He said he'd send it over, and I added his video file to my collection with the satisfaction of a librarian completing a rare book set. Every piece of evidence was another nail in Crystal's coffin, and I was building something that would make IKEA furniture instructions look simple. That night, I sat in my garage, a place that had become part war room, part therapy office, and looked at the pile of hair I'd saved from the party. Yeah, I'd gathered strands of my daughter's hair from Crystal's backyard carpet because I'm apparently the kind of person who collects evidence like a crime scene investigator. I held them in my hand, these physical remnants of what had been taken from Zoe, and felt that cold anger settle even deeper into my bones. My phone buzzed. Another post from Crystal, this time about rising above negativity. I gave it a thumbs up, poured myself another coffee, and opened my laptop to the folder labeled Exhibit A Idiocy. Because here's what Crystal didn't understand. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It means strategic. It means I'm not wasting energy on reactions when I could be building something that actually matters. And buddy, was I building something spectacular? There's something about sitting alone in a garage at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night that makes you reassess your life choices. Most guys my age use their garages for normal things. working on cars they'll never actually fix, organizing tools they bought at Home Depot and used once, or hiding from their families while pretending to be busy with important man stuff. Me? I'd turn mine into what I can only describe as a command center for justified revenge, complete with a mini fridge full of energy drinks, a folding table covered in printed documents, and apparently a Ziploc bag containing strands of my daughter's hair, because my life had officially crossed into territory that would concern a therapist. I was sitting in my camping chair, the fancy one with the cup holder that I bought for tailgating and had used exactly twice, staring at that bag of hair like it held the secrets to the universe. Under the fluorescent light I'd installed after Lila complained the garage was too dark, Zoe's curls looked even more tragic, these beautiful auburn strands that had taken years to grow and seconds to destroy. I kept thinking about how she'd cried herself to sleep again that night, how she'd asked me at dinner if she could wear a hat to school tomorrow, how my brave, confident daughter had been reduced to someone who wanted to hide. That's when it hit me. Not like a gentle realization, but like one of those moment of clarity slaps you see in movies, except nobody was actually hitting me, and there was no dramatic music, just the sound of my neighbor's dog barking at literally nothing like it did every single night. I realized something incredibly simple, the kind of truth that seems obvious once you think it, but somehow gets buried under all the social pressure and family politics. If you let people treat your child like a punchline, they'll rewrite your whole life as a joke. Crystal had assaulted my daughter. And yeah, I was calling it assault because that's what it was, not a mistake, or a moment of poor judgment, or whatever sanitized language people wanted to use to make it more palatable. She'd physically restrained Zoe and cut off her hair as punishment for the crime of being pretty and well-liked. And now she was posting on Facebook about teaching life lessons while my kid was upstairs probably having nightmares about scissors. If I let this slide, if I just kept the peace like everyone was suggesting, what message was I sending? That Zoe didn't matter? That family connections were more important than protecting my daughter? That grown adults could abuse children as long as they were related to us? Yeah, that wasn't going to work for me. Not even a little bit. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Trent Morrison. Now, Trent and I go way back. We met at the gym about 5 years ago when he corrected my deadlift form and possibly saved me from a lifetime of back problems. He's one of those guys who's good at everything in an annoying way. He's a lawyer, he's in great shape. He's got a beautiful wife and 2 kids who are somehow both athletic and smart, and he makes really good chili that wins contests. Normally, I'd hate him on principle, but he's also genuinely nice and funny, which makes it impossible to maintain proper jealous resentment. More importantly, he was a damn good lawyer who specialized in personal injury and family law, and he had this quality I desperately needed. He thought like someone who grew up watching action movies and believed in actual justice, not just legal technicalities. I checked the time. 11:15 p.m. That was either too late or exactly the right time to call, depending on how you looked at it. I hit the call button before I could overthink it. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding alert despite the hour. Marcus? Everything okay, man? You usually only call this late when you need a spotter or your wife is mad at you. Both, actually, I said, and I could hear him laugh on the other end. But I need the lawyer version of you right now, not the gym buddy version. His tone shifted immediately, going from casual to professional in a heartbeat. What's going on? So I told him. The whole story, start to finish, from walking into the party with cupcakes to Crystal's scissor rampage to Lila telling me to let it go to the Facebook posts to my current situation of sitting in my garage like some kind of suburban Batman planning justice. I try to keep it factual, try not to let the emotion bleed through too much, but my voice cracked a little when I got to the part about Zoe asking if people would make fun of her at school. There was silence on the other end when I finished, the kind that made me wonder if the call had dropped. Then Trent started laughing. Not a little chuckle, but full-on, belly-deep laughter that went on for a solid 10 seconds. I'm sorry, he finally managed, still laughing. I'm not laughing at Zoe, I swear. I'm laughing at the absolute insanity of what you just described. Please, and I mean please tell me you filmed it. Please tell me you have evidence of this woman committing assault with bad fashion choices at a children's birthday party. I've got 3 different angles, timestamps, witnesses, and a collection of social media posts that would make a prosecutor weep with joy, I said, feeling a smile creep onto my face for the first time in days. I've also got the hair she cut off in a Ziploc bag, which I realize sounds insane, but seemed important at the time. That's actually not insane. That's perfect. Physical evidence. Marcus, my man, you've basically built half my case for me already. What exactly are you thinking here? What do you want to happen? That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? I leaned back in my camping chair, staring at the ceiling of my garage where I'd hung my old college football pennant and a World's Okayest Dad sign that Zoe had given me as a joke. What did I want? I want her to face actual consequences, I said slowly, working through it as I spoke. I want there to be a record of what she did so she can't just pretend it never happened. I want Zoe to see that when someone hurts you, you don't just take it because keeping the peace is more convenient for everyone else. And honestly, I want Crystal to spend at least one night unable to sleep because she's worried about what's coming, the same way she made my daughter unable to sleep because she's traumatized. So we're talking criminal charges, Trent said, and I could hear him getting excited, which probably said something about both of us. Assault on a minor, possibly child endangerment, depending on how we frame it. We could go civil too, emotional distress, therapy costs, whatever we can make stick. This is actually a pretty solid case, Marcus. Like, genuinely solid. I've seen prosecutors take worse to trial. The thing is, I said, and this was the part I'd been wrestling with, everyone's going to think I'm being petty. My wife already thinks I'm overreacting. The family's going to lose their minds. Her mother's going to give me the disappointed grandmother speech about forgiveness. I'm going to be the villain here. Trent was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice had that serious quality that reminded me why he was good at his job. Let me ask you something. If some random woman at a park had grabbed Zoe and cut off her hair, would you press charges? In a heartbeat. Would you feel petty about it? Of course not. Then why does Crystal being family change that? If anything, it makes it worse. She's someone who was supposed to protect Zoe, someone Zoe trusted, and she used that position to hurt her. The fact that people are telling you to let it go because she's family is exactly why we have a legal system that doesn't care about family politics. Look, man, I get it. Family pressure is real. But you know what else is real? The fact that your daughter is going to remember how you handled this for the rest of her life. He was right. Of course he was right. That's the annoying thing about having friends who are good at their jobs. They tend to be right when you need them to be. So what do? I asked, feeling something settle in my chest, that last bit of hesitation finally evaporating. We file a police report first thing tomorrow, Trent said, and I could hear papers rustling on his end like he was already taking notes. You bring me everything you've got, videos, photos, witness list, social media posts, the hair in the Ziploc bag, which is weird, but I love it. We document everything officially, get it on the record. Then we see what the prosecutor wants to do with it. Best case scenario, they charge her. Worst case, we have everything documented for a civil suit. Either way, Crystal's going to have a very bad few months, and she's going to learn that actions have consequences. My wife is going to kill me, I said, but I was smiling. Your wife will get over it. Your daughter won't get over watching her dad choose family politics over protecting her. Trust me on this one. I've seen too many cases where the kid ends up in therapy at 25 because their parents taught them that keeping the peace is more important than their safety. We talked for another 20 minutes, going over details and strategy and what I needed to bring tomorrow. Trent was in full lawyer mode now, asking questions about exact timings and whether anyone had tried to stop Crystal and if there were any medical costs associated with fixing Zoe's hair. I answered everything while simultaneously taking notes on my phone because old habits die hard, and I was apparently incapable of having a conversation without documenting it. When we finally hung up, it was almost midnight. I sat in my garage for a few more minutes, looking at my evidence folders, my witness list, my carefully organized timeline of events. I thought about Zoe upstairs, probably asleep by now, but still dealing with the aftermath of Crystal's tantrum. I thought about Lila, who meant well, but was wrong about this. I thought about Crystal, posting her inspirational quotes and living her best life while my daughter struggled with the consequences of her actions. Then I stood up, stretched my legs because that camping chair was murder on my back, and walked into the house with the kind of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow, I was going to the police station. Tomorrow, I was turning all my careful documentation into official reports and legal filings. Tomorrow, Crystal was going to learn what happens when you mess with someone's kid and that someone happens to be really, really good at project management. I stopped by Zoe's room on my way to bed, peeking in to see her sleeping peacefully for once, her destroyed hair spread across the pillow. I made a silent promise to her that she'd never have to wonder if I had her back, that she'd never doubt whether protecting her was more important than keeping fake peace with terrible people. And then I went to bed, sleeping better than I had in days, because nothing helps you sleep like finally making a decision you know is right, even if everyone else thinks you're crazy. Especially when everyone else thinks you're crazy. Waking up the morning after making a life-altering decision is weird. Most people would expect some kind of doubt to creep in, that little voice asking if maybe you're overreacting, if perhaps you should just let sleeping dogs lie, and all those other cliches people use when they're trying to convince themselves that doing nothing is the same as doing the right thing. But me? I woke up at 6 a.m. feeling more focused than I had since my wedding day, which is saying something because that day involved a lot of focus to avoid tripping during the ceremony and becoming a viral video. Lila was still asleep, which was perfect because I didn't need another lecture about family unity and letting things go. I got dressed in my best business casual outfit, the one I save for important meetings and apparently police stations, made coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and started gathering my evidence. Everything went into my laptop bag, the printed documents, the flash drive with all the videos, the witness list, the social media screenshots, and yes, the Ziploc bag with Zoe's hair, because apparently I was committed to this level of detail. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror while brushing my teeth and had this moment of clarity that I must have looked completely unhinged to anyone who didn't know the full story. Here I was, a 38-year-old project manager, preparing to file criminal charges against my sister-in-law over a birthday party incident like I was building a case against the mob. But then I thought about Zoe's face when she'd looked in the mirror after Crystal's attack, and suddenly I didn't feel crazy at all. I felt like the only sane person in a world that had normalized adults assaulting children as long as they were related. I left a note for Lila on the kitchen counter. Took the morning off work. Running errands. Back by lunch. Love you. Short, sweet, and technically not a lie since filing police reports definitely counts as errands. Just not the kind involving grocery stores or dry cleaning. The police station was a 15-minute drive from our house, in that part of town where municipal buildings cluster together like they're afraid to be alone. I'd driven past it 1,000 times, but never actually been inside, which I guess is a good thing because it means I'd successfully avoided getting arrested or needing to report crimes up until now. The parking lot was mostly empty at 7:30 in the morning, just a few police cruisers and a minivan that probably belonged to some other suburban parent dealing with their own drama. Walking through those doors felt surreal. The lobby was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town police station. Linoleum floors that had seen better days, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look vaguely sick, and that distinctive smell of coffee, cleaning products, and bureaucracy. There was a desk sergeant who looked like he'd been doing this job since the Reagan administration, with gray hair and the kind of tired expression that suggested he'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed either time. "Help you?" he asked, glancing up from whatever paperwork he was shuffling. "I need to file a police report," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "For assault on a minor." That got his attention. His eyes sharpened, and he straightened up in his chair like I'd just said the magic words that turned a boring Tuesday morning shift into something worth paying attention to. Assault on a minor? When did this occur? Last Saturday, at a birthday party. I could see him trying to work out whether this was serious or some kind of custody dispute nonsense, so I added, "I have video evidence, multiple witnesses, and physical evidence. The perpetrator is my wife's sister, and she cut off my daughter's hair with scissors while restraining her in front of 30 people." His eyebrows went up so high they practically disappeared into his hairline. She did what now? 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a small interview room that probably doubled as someone's storage closet, talking to Officer Patricia Mendez, who looked like she was in her early 40s and had the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she dealt with actual criminals regularly and had very little patience for nonsense. I liked her immediately. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, reviewing the initial statement I'd given. "Your sister-in-law, Crystal Pemberton, became upset because your daughter was receiving compliments at her daughter's birthday party. And her response was to physically restrain your 10-year-old and cut off her hair with safety scissors." That's exactly what happened, I said, pulling out my laptop. And I have it all documented. I walked her through everything. First, the timeline. When we arrived, when the compliments started, when Crystal snapped. Then I showed her Uncle Vernon's video, and I watched her face go from professionally neutral to barely concealed shock as she watched a grown woman hack away at a child's hair while other adults stood around looking horrified. Jesus, she muttered, and then caught herself. Sorry, that's just wow. And this was unprovoked. Completely. Zoe was just standing there being a normal kid at a party. She didn't say anything to Crystal, didn't do anything to Emma. She literally just existed with nice hair. Officer Mendez watched the video 2 more times, taking notes. Then I showed her the other angles, the photos of Zoe's hair afterward, the text messages from other parents who'd been at the party expressing shock and concern. I showed her Crystal's Facebook posts, especially the one about teaching kids not to compete that she'd posted after the incident. She's basically confessing on social media, Officer Mendez said, and I could hear something like admiration in her voice. That's new. Usually people try to hide their crimes, not document them for the internet. She's a special kind of stupid, I said, and then remembered I was talking to a police officer and probably should maintain some level of professionalism. I mean, she lacks awareness of consequences. No, your first assessment was accurate. She clicked through more screenshots, shaking her head. Sir, this is one of the most well-documented assault cases I've seen outside of, like, bank robberies with security cameras. You've got video from multiple angles, witnesses, physical evidence, and the suspect posting about it online. Do you work in law enforcement? Project manager, I said. I'm just really organized. Clearly. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. I have to ask, are you sure you want to pursue this? I mean, obviously what she did was wrong, but this is family. Once we file this report and it goes to the prosecutor, there's no taking it back. Relationships will be damaged. Holidays are going to be awkward. I'd been expecting this question, had prepared for it during my garage thinking sessions. Officer Mendez, if a stranger at a park had grabbed my daughter and cut off her hair, would you be asking me if I was sure I wanted to press charges? No, she admitted. Then why does Crystal being related to me change what she did? If anything, it makes it worse. My daughter trusted her. We all did. And she violated that trust in front of 30 people, traumatized my kid, and then went on social media to brag about it. So yeah, I'm sure. I'm very, very sure. She nodded, something like respect crossing her face. All right then, let's do this properly. We spent the next hour going through everything in detail. She made copies of all my evidence, took my formal statement, got contact information for all 17 witnesses on my list, and carefully documented the physical evidence, including the hair, which she agreed was weird but useful. She asked questions about Zoe's emotional state, whether we'd sought medical attention for any injuries, if there had been previous incidents with Crystal. Just to be clear, Officer Mendez said as we were wrapping up, based on what you've shown me, I'm classifying this as assault on a minor. Given that the victim is under 12 and the assault involved restraint and the use of an implement, even if it was just safety scissors, the prosecutor will likely take this seriously. Ms. Pemberton will be contacted, probably later today. She'll need to come in for questioning. Depending on how that goes and what the prosecutor decides, charges could be filed within the week. Good, I said, and meant it. You understand this is going to cause significant family conflict? It already caused significant family conflict when she assaulted my daughter. I'm just making sure there are consequences for it. She actually smiled at that. Fair enough. You'll get a call when we have updates. In the meantime, if Ms. Pemberton contacts you or tries to intimidate you or your family, document everything and call us immediately. I thanked her, shook her hand, and walked out of that police station feeling lighter than I had in days. The morning sun was bright, the air was crisp, and somewhere across town, Crystal was about to have a very bad day. The thought made me smile. My phone buzzed as I got to my car. A text from Trent. How'd it go? Better than expected. I typed back. Officer said it's one of the best documented cases she's seen. They're contacting Crystal today. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. This is why I tell people to document everything. You basically did my job for me. I drove home taking the scenic route, in no particular hurry. I stopped at Dunkin' Donuts and got Zoe's favorite, a chocolate frosted donut with sprinkles. Because if there was ever a day that deserved a surprise treat, It was the day her dad officially stood up for her in a way that couldn't be ignored or swept under the rug. When I got home, Lila was in the kitchen making breakfast, still in her robe. She looked at me suspiciously when I walked in. "What errands?" she asked. "Just some administrative stuff," I said cheerfully, holding up the Dunkin' Donuts bag. "Got Zoe a surprise." "Marcus, what did you do?" "I filed a police report against your sister for assaulting our daughter. Want some coffee?" The look on her face was somewhere between horror and resignation, like she'd known this was coming but had been hoping I'd chicken out. "You didn't." "I absolutely did. Complete with video evidence, witness statements, and physical evidence." The officer said it was one of the most well-documented cases she'd seen. "I'm basically an overachiever at this point." "Marcus, Lila, we can have this argument, but the report's already filed. Crystal's going to be contacted by the police today. This is happening. The only question is whether you're going to keep trying to convince me I'm wrong, or if you're going to realize that protecting our daughter is more important than protecting your sister from the consequences of her own actions." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, then opened it again, then just shook her head and poured herself more coffee, which I took as progress. Zoe came downstairs a few minutes later, and I handed her the donut with a smile. "Special delivery for my favorite daughter." "I'm your only daughter, Dad. Which makes you automatically my favorite. It's basic math." She giggled, and the sound made every awkward conversation and uncomfortable police station visit worth it. Because that's what this was really about, making sure my kid knew that when someone hurt her, I'd move heaven, earth, and the entire legal system to make it right. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Officer Mendez. Ms. Pemberton has been notified and is scheduled to come in this afternoon. Thought you'd want to know." I smiled, took a bite of my coffee, and thought about Crystal's face when she got that call. Operation Quiet Storm was officially in motion. There's this thing about suburban neighborhoods that people don't tell you until you're already trapped in a 30-year mortgage. Information travels faster than gossip at a middle school lunch table. Seriously, you could sneeze in your backyard on a Tuesday afternoon, and by Wednesday morning, 3 different neighbors would be asking if you needed allergy medication recommendations and whether you'd considered getting your air ducts cleaned. So when Crystal got that call from the police station asking her to come in for questioning about assaulting a minor, the news spread through our community like wildfire in a drought. Fast, destructive, and absolutely impossible to contain. I first noticed things changing on Wednesday morning, exactly 2 days after I'd filed the report. I was getting ready for work when my phone started blowing up with text messages from people I barely talked to. My neighbor Dave, who I'd maybe exchanged 3 words with beyond nice weather in the 5 years we'd lived here, sent me a message that just said, Dude, is it true about Crystal?" Then came messages from parents from Zoe's school, people from the neighborhood Facebook group that I'd muted years ago, but apparently was still a member of, and even my dentist receptionist who somehow heard about it through her sister, who knew someone who worked at the police station. The story was everywhere, and it was growing with each retelling like some kind of suburban legend. The basic facts were there. Crystal cut Zoe's hair at a birthday party, but people were adding their own creative flourishes. One version had her using actual fabric scissors. Another claimed she'd done it because of some ancient family feud. My personal favorite was the one where apparently I'd remained eerily calm throughout the whole thing, which made me sound like some kind of revenge-plotting supervillain instead of just a dad with decent impulse control and a really good lawyer. But the real entertainment was watching Crystal's carefully constructed queen of the neighborhood image crack like an egg dropped from a 3-story building. This woman had spent years cultivating this persona of the perfect suburban mom. PTA president, charity event organizer, the lady who always volunteered to bring homemade cupcakes and never, ever use store-bought frosting because apparently that's a personality trait now. She had a following, actual literal followers who treated her like some kind of lifestyle guru because she knew how to coordinate throw pillows and post inspirational quotes about wine consumption. All of that started crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. The PDA moms were the first to jump ship, and let me tell you, watching the exodus was more satisfying than any revenge movie I'd ever seen. These were the same women who'd been liking all of Crystal's posts, commenting on her photos with strings of heart emojis, and probably secretly competing to be her best friend. Within 48 hours of the news breaking, I watched her Facebook friend count drop like a stock market crash. We're talking about a loss of 37 friends in one day, which I know because I was petty enough to check multiple times and keep a mental tally. Jennifer Morrison, who'd been Crystal's co-chair on the spring fundraiser committee, posted a vague status about being shocked and disappointed by people you thought you knew, which was suburban mom code for I'm publicly distancing myself from Crystal without actually naming names because I still want to maintain plausible deniability. Within an hour, 15 other PDA moms had liked and commented, all expressing similar sentiments about trust and character and protecting children, like they were auditioning for a very boring version of Law and Order, PDA unit. The neighborhood Facebook group, which I'd reopened specifically to watch the drama unfold because I'm only human, was an absolute disaster zone. Someone had posted asking if anyone knew anything about the incident at Emma Pemberton's party, and the comments section exploded faster than a shaken soda can. People were sharing their own Crystal stories, incidents that had apparently been bothering them for years, but nobody had wanted to bring up because she was too socially powerful. Turns out, Crystal had a history of being terrible that everyone had just been tolerating. Karen Shin shared a story about how Crystal had tried to get her daughter kicked off the soccer team because she was too competitive and making Emma look bad. Michelle Rodriguez talked about how Crystal had spread rumors that her homemade tamales for the multicultural potluck were actually store-bought because apparently authentic cooking threatened her somehow. Even Quiet Susan Park, who I'd never seen post anything more controversial than pictures of her garden, wrote a 3-paragraph essay about how Crystal had made her cry at a bake sale over the proper way to display brownies. It was like watching a dam break, except instead of water, it was years of pent-up frustration with a woman who'd been using her social status to terrorize people with better hair than her daughter. The common thread in all these stories was that Crystal couldn't handle anyone, adult or child, outshining Emma in any way. She'd been pulling this jealous behavior for years, but the haircutting incident was apparently the line that finally made people say, okay, that's too far, even for Crystal. Meanwhile, back at home, Lila was having what I can only describe as a full-scale meltdown about the whole situation. She'd been relatively quiet for the first day after I filed the report, probably processing or hoping it would all magically go away, but by Wednesday evening, she was in full crisis mode. "Marcus, you need to drop this," she said, cornering me in the kitchen while I was trying to make dinner. "This is getting out of control. Do you see what's happening? My sister is being destroyed on social media. People are unfriending her. The PDA moms are turning on her. This is too much." I continued stirring the pasta sauce, keeping my voice level. "Crystal destroyed herself when she assaulted our daughter. I just documented it. She's family, Marcus. Family." Lila's voice was getting that high-pitched quality that meant she was about 2 seconds away from either crying or throwing something. "You're supposed to protect family, not prosecute them." I turned off the stove and faced her directly, because this conversation needed my full attention. "Lila, honey, I love you. But your definition of family is seriously messed up. Family doesn't mean you get a free pass to abuse people. Crystal is family to us, sure. But you know who else is family? Zoe, our actual daughter. The kid who cried herself to sleep for 3 nights because her aunt attacked her at a party. So when you tell me I should protect family, which family member exactly are you talking about? That's not fair." "No. What's not fair is asking me to choose between protecting our daughter and protecting your sister from consequences she absolutely deserves. You want to talk about family? Fine. Let's talk about how Crystal has spent years being jealous of Zoe, making snide comments about her, competing with a literal child. Let's talk about how she posted on Facebook about teaching humility after she assaulted our daughter. Let's talk about how she's shown exactly zero remorse, hasn't apologized, and seems to think she was justified in what she did." Lila's eyes were watering now, but I couldn't tell if it was from anger or sadness or just the realization that I wasn't backing down. "So that's it. You're just going to destroy my relationship with my sister over this." "I'm not destroying anything. Crystal destroyed it when she decided that safety scissors were an appropriate response to childhood beauty. And you know what the really messed up part is? You're more worried about your relationship with your sister than you are about our daughter's trauma. Think about that for a second. She didn't have a response to that, just turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the kitchen with overcooked pasta and the satisfaction of being absolutely right even though it made everyone uncomfortable. The best part of all this, and yes, I'm petty enough to have a favorite part, was watching Zoe's response to everything. While Crystal was losing friends and social standing faster than a politician caught in a scandal, my daughter was actually thriving. We'd taken her to a professional stylist the day after I filed the report, a woman named Maria who'd heard about what happened and offered to fix Zoe's hair for free because apparently even hairdressers have a code about crimes against follicles. Maria had worked magic, turning the disaster Crystal had created into an adorable pixie cut that actually looked intentional and stylish. Zoe had stared at herself in the mirror for a solid 5 minutes, turning her head side to side, and then she'd smiled. Really smiled, not the fake one she'd been using since the party. "Dad," she said that evening, running her fingers through her short hair for the 100th time. "I think my head feels lighter." I grinned, feeling something warm spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee I'd been drinking. "That's what happens when you drop toxic people, sweetheart. Everything feels lighter." She thought about that for a moment, then looked at me with those serious eyes that sometimes made her seem way older than 10. "Is Aunt Crystal toxic?" "Like a waste dump, kiddo. Like a waste dump." By the end of the week, Crystal's social empire had basically collapsed. Her Instagram followers had dropped by half. The PDA had accepted her resignation from the board, and 3 different neighborhood moms had blocked her after she tried to spin the story in the group chat. The woman who'd strutted into that birthday party like she owned the world was now basically a pariah, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy watching every second of it. Because here's the thing about consequences. They're a lot like karma, except faster and more legally binding. Crystal had spent years thinking she was untouchable, that her social status and family connections meant she could do whatever she wanted without repercussions. Turns out, all it took was one dad with decent documentation skills and a complete lack of patience for bullies, even bullies who were related to him by marriage. Lila still wasn't talking to me much, but Zoe was smiling again. And given the choice between my wife's temporary anger and my daughter's long-term well-being, I'd choose Zoe every single time. Some people called it petty. I called it parenting. And honestly, the view from the moral high ground was pretty damn good. If you've ever been invited to a family peace dinner, you already know it's actually an ambush disguised as a potluck. It's the suburban equivalent of those mob meetings in movies where everyone smiles and passes the marinara while secretly planning who's getting whacked after dessert. So when Lila's mother called on Friday afternoon with her sweet, grandmotherly voice asking if we could all get together this weekend to talk things through like adults, I knew exactly what I was walking into. This wasn't going to be a dinner. This was going to be an intervention, a trial, and a guilt trip factory all rolled into one, served with a side of someone's mediocre casserole. "It'll be small," Patricia, my mother-in-law, assured me over the phone, which was already a red flag because nothing described as small by a woman who considers 20 people intimate has ever actually been small. Just family. We need to clear the air before this gets any more out of hand. Out of hand. Like Crystal assaulting my daughter was just a minor miscommunication that could be fixed with proper dialogue and maybe some store-bought cookies. But I agreed to go because sometimes you have to walk into the lion's den to prove you're not afraid of lions, even when the lions are actually just your in-laws armed with passive aggression and Pyrex dishes. The dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening at Patricia's house, which was this massive colonial-style home in the fancy part of town where the houses all look like they're competing for the cover of Better Homes and Gardens. Patricia and her husband George, who I genuinely liked because he had the good sense to stay out of drama and focus on golf, had bought the place after George's dental practice took off, and she'd been using it as a venue for family gatherings ever since. Usually these events were fine, just normal holiday stuff with too much food and relatives asking when we were going to have another kid. But tonight was different. Tonight had an agenda, and I was pretty sure that agenda was titled, "Make Marcus Feel Bad and Fix Crystal's Life." We arrived at 6:30, fashionably late because I'd insisted on stopping for coffee first, much to Lila's irritation. Zoe was with us, wearing a cute denim jacket that covered her new pixie cut, though she kept touching it nervously in the car. I'd asked her if she wanted to stay with my parents for the evening, but she'd insisted on coming, said she wanted to see what happens, which made me both proud and concerned that my 10-year-old was developing a taste for drama. The moment we walked through the door, I could feel the tension thick enough to cut with one of Crystal's assault scissors. The living room was set up like a United Nations peace summit, with strategic seating arrangements that someone had clearly planned. Patricia was in her usual chair by the fireplace. George was standing by the bar looking like he wished he was anywhere else. And Crystal was on the couch with her husband Doug, who had the expression of a man who'd been drafted into a war he didn't understand. But the real surprise was the supporting cast. Lila's brother Marcus Jr. Yes, we have the same name, which has caused endless confusion at family events, was there with his wife Stephanie. Lila's Aunt Carol had shown up, probably because she lived for this kind of drama. Even Doug's parents were present, sitting on the love seat looking uncomfortable and out of place, like they'd been called as character witnesses but weren't sure for which side. Marcus, Zoe, so glad you could make it, Patricia said with the kind of forced enthusiasm that flight attendants use when explaining emergency exits. She swooped in to hug Zoe, making a big show of complimenting her new haircut, while carefully not mentioning why she had a new haircut in the first place. Don't you look adorable? So stylish. Crystal was watching from the couch, and I caught her eye for just a second. She looked terrible, and I don't mean that in a petty way, though let's be honest, there was some petty satisfaction involved. Her hair was messier than usual, her makeup looked hastily applied, and she had this hunted expression like someone who'd spent the last week getting dragged on social media and was only now realizing that actions have consequences. Good. We did the awkward small talk dance for about 15 minutes while Patricia finished setting up the dining room. George tried to talk to me about a basketball game. Bless him, but even sports couldn't cut through the weird energy in that room. Zoe stuck close to my side, which told me she was picking up on the tension too. Kids are smart like that. They can sense when adults are about to have the kind of conversation that starts with, "We need to talk," and ends with someone crying in a bathroom. Finally, Patricia announced that dinner was ready, and we all filed into the dining room like prisoners heading to their last meal. The table was loaded with food. There was a green bean casserole, some kind of chicken dish, mashed potatoes, rolls, and at least 3 different salads because apparently we needed options. It was the kind of spread that screamed, "I'm trying so hard to make this seem normal," which just made it more obvious that nothing about this evening was normal. We sat down in what were clearly assigned seats. I ended up directly across from Crystal, which felt intentional. Lila was next to me, practically vibrating with anxiety. Patricia was at the head of the table, like she was chairing a board meeting, and George was at the other end looking like he was calculating how quickly he could excuse himself to check on something in the garage. Patricia led us in saying grace, which lasted approximately 3 times longer than normal and included specific mentions of forgiveness, family bonds, understanding, and moving forward, which told me exactly where this evening was headed. When she finally said, "Amen," I echoed it with enough enthusiasm to make it clear I was just being polite, not actually agreeing with her subliminal messaging. We started eating in what might have been the most uncomfortable silence I'd experienced since my last dental surgery. The only sounds were forks scraping plates and someone's phone buzzing repeatedly until they finally silenced it. This went on for maybe 5 minutes before Patricia decided it was time to get to the real purpose of the evening. So, she began, setting down her fork with purpose. "I think we all know why we're here. We've had an unfortunate incident, and I believe it's time we addressed it as a family. Crystal has something she wants to say." I looked at Crystal, who was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, even though I was pretty sure she wasn't actually crying yet. She took a shaky breath, and I braced myself for whatever performance was about to happen. "Marcus, Lila, Zoe," Crystal started, her voice trembling like she was auditioning for a soap opera. "I want to apologize for what happened at Emma's party. I was overwhelmed, I wasn't thinking clearly, and I made a terrible mistake. I never meant to hurt Zoe. I love her. She's my niece. And I'm so sorry." The tears started flowing then. Or at least, she made a good show of wiping at her eyes and sniffling. Doug put his arm around her shoulders in what I'm sure was supposed to be a supportive gesture, but mostly looked like he was physically holding her together. Everyone at the table was looking at me expectantly, waiting for me to accept this apology and declare that all was forgiven and we could all move on and pretend this never happened. Except I wasn't buying it. Not even a little bit. "Okay," I said, taking a bite of mashed potatoes. "Thanks for the apology." The table went quiet. That wasn't the response they wanted. Lila elbowed me under the table, which I ignored. Patricia cleared her throat. "Marcus, don't you think it's time to let this go? Crystal has apologized. She's learned her lesson." This police business is tearing our family apart. Surely we can handle this within the family without involving the authorities. Handle it how exactly? I asked, my voice conversational. Like we handled all those other times Crystal got jealous of Zoe? Like we handled it when she spread rumors about her at school? Like we handled it when she tried to get Zoe kicked out of the school play? Because from where I'm sitting, handling it within the family has just meant enabling Crystal to keep escalating her behavior until she finally crossed a line so big that even you can't pretend it didn't happen. Marcus, Lila hissed, but I was just getting started. Patricia's face was getting red. This is about forgiveness, Marcus. It's about family. We need to support each other, especially in difficult times. What Crystal did was wrong. Yes, but involving the police. Making this public? That's vindictive. That's not what family does. I set down my fork and looked directly at my mother-in-law. You're right. It is about forgiveness. And I already forgave her. I paused, letting that sink in. The police station didn't. The silence that followed was so thick you could have used it for insulation. Someone's fork clattered against their plate. George made a noise that might have been a suppressed laugh. Zoe was looking at me with something like awe. Crystal's crying intensified, though I noticed she kept checking to see if people were watching her. How can you say you forgive me and then try to have me arrested? She sobbed. Pretty easily, actually, I said. Forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences. It just means I'm not going to spend my life being angry at you. But you assaulted my daughter. You restrained her and cut off her hair because you were jealous that people thought she was pretty. That's not a family disagreement, Crystal. That's a crime. And crimes get reported to the police. That's how society works. Doug finally spoke up, his voice tight. This is going to ruin our lives. Do you understand that? Crystal could get a criminal record over this. She could lose her job. This could affect Emma. Then maybe Crystal should have thought about that before she decided to attack a 10-year-old with scissors, I replied. Actions have consequences, Doug. That's literally the first thing we teach kids. But apparently Crystal missed that lesson, so now the legal system gets to teach it instead. Lila's Aunt Carol, who'd been quiet up until now, decided to chime in. You're being petty, Marcus. This is petty revenge dressed up as righteousness. I looked at her, then around the table at all of them. These people who wanted me to just let it go, to prioritize Crystal's comfort over my daughter's justice, to teach Zoe that family loyalty means accepting abuse. Petty, I said, and I let myself smile. No, Carol. Petty would be posting about this on Facebook. Petty would be spreading rumors. Petty would be cutting someone's hair at a party. I paused. What I'm doing isn't petty. It's precise. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue more, but George, wonderful, sensible George, stood up and said, I think maybe we should move on to dessert. Patricia made pie. The rest of the dinner was painfully awkward, but I didn't care. I'd said what needed to be said. Zoe was still at my side, still safe, still learning that her father would always choose protecting her over making other people comfortable. And that was worth any amount of family dinners from hell. There's a special kind of satisfaction that comes from watching karma punch someone in the face, especially when you're the one who introduced karma to that person's address. It's like watching a movie you've already seen, but enjoying it even more the second time, because you know all the good parts are coming. That's exactly how I felt Monday morning when I accidentally happened to be at the police station at the exact same time Crystal and Doug were scheduled for their official interview with the detectives handling the case. Okay, fine, it wasn't an accident. Officer Mendez had called me the day before to let me know when Crystal would be coming in, and while she didn't explicitly say I should show up, she also didn't explicitly say I shouldn't, which in my interpretation meant I had a standing invitation to witness justice being served in real time. So I took a long lunch break from work, told my boss I had an important appointment, which wasn't technically a lie, and drove to the police station with a coffee from Starbucks and the kind of anticipation usually reserved for playoff games and Black Friday sales. I arrived at exactly 10:47 a.m., which was 13 minutes after Crystal and Doug's scheduled appointment time, because showing up late to someone else's worst day is peak petty, and I was absolutely operating at peak levels. The parking lot had more cars than last time I was here, including a silver Lexus SUV that I recognized as Crystal's because she'd posted about 17 Instagram photos of it when she first bought it, all with captions about treating yourself and boss mom energy. That Lexus was now parked in a spot near the entrance, probably because Crystal had arrived early out of nervousness, which made me smile into my overpriced latte. The inside of the police station was busier than my first visit. There were a couple of people waiting in the lobby area, looking either bored or anxious depending on why they were there. The same desk sergeant from before, Officer Williams, according to his name tag, gave me a nod of recognition when I walked in, which made me feel like a regular at a restaurant, except instead of knowing my usual order, he knew I was here to watch my sister-in-law get questioned about assault charges. "Mr. Mitchell," he said with the hint of a smile. "Detective Harris is with Ms. Pemberton and her husband in interview. Room 2. Officer Mendez said you might stop by. Just wanted to see if there was any paperwork I needed to sign," I said, which was partially true. I did need to sign some additional witness statements. The fact that interview room 2 had a window that looked out into the hallway where I'd be doing said paperwork was purely coincidental. Purely. Officer Williams directed me to a desk with forms that definitely could have been mailed to me or signed electronically, but instead required my physical presence at the station during the exact time frame that Crystal was being interrogated. Funny how that worked out. The desk was positioned perfectly. I had a clear view through the window of interview room 2, though the glass was one way so Crystal couldn't see me watching. It was like having front row seats to the universe finally balancing its cosmic checkbook. I could see Crystal sitting at a metal table that looked like it had been through about 3 decades of police interrogations and budget cuts. She was wearing what I called her serious adult outfit, a navy blazer over a white blouse. Probably the same thing she wore to PTA meetings when she wanted to intimidate other parents into volunteering for bake sales. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and even from this distance, I could see the tension in her shoulders. Doug sat next to her in a suit that looked uncomfortable, like he'd grabbed it from the back of his closet where it had been living since their wedding and was now questioning all his life choices that had led to this moment. Detective Harris, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them, was sitting across from them with a folder open in front of her. I couldn't hear what they were saying through the glass, but I could read body language like a book, and this book was titled Two People Realizing They're in Serious Trouble. Crystal was crying, of course, because that was her go-to strategy for getting out of things. I watched her dab at her eyes with a tissue while Doug held her hand, both of them looking like they were attending a funeral for Crystal's reputation, which I guess they kind of were. Detective Harris remained completely unmoved by the waterworks, which told me she was very good at her job and had probably seen this performance before from other people who thought tears were a get-out-of-jail-free card. I was pretending to read the forms in front of me, something about witness testimony protocols that I'd already read online, when I saw Doug start gesturing animatedly. His face was getting red, and he appeared to be raising his voice, though I still couldn't hear through the glass. Detective Harris leaned back in her chair with her arms crossed, letting him tire himself out like a parent waiting for a toddler to finish a tantrum. Crystal put her hand on Doug's arm, probably trying to calm him down before he made things worse, which suggested she had at least some survival instincts left. The whole scene was fascinating in the way that watching a slow-motion car crash is fascinating. You know it's wrong to enjoy it, but you also can't look away. Here was a woman who'd spent years building this perfect image, cultivating her social media presence, positioning herself as some kind of suburban lifestyle guru, and now she was sitting in a police interrogation room explaining why she'd attacked a child with safety scissors. The irony was so thick you could serve it at Thanksgiving. I was on my second page of forms, actually signing them this time since I did need to complete them eventually, when the door to interview room 2 opened and Detective Harris stepped out. She walked directly toward where I was sitting, which made my heart rate pick up slightly, because even when you're the victim's father and completely in the right, something about a detective approaching you in a police station triggers that primal, "Am I in trouble?" response. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice professional, but with a hint of something that might have been amusement. "Officer Mendez mentioned you might be here. Do you have a moment?" "Of course," I said, standing up and following her to a small office down the hall. Once inside with the door closed, her professional demeanor cracked slightly, and she actually smiled. "I've been doing this job for 23 years, she said, sitting on the edge of her desk. "And I have never, and I mean never, had a case come across my desk that was this well documented by a civilian. You basically did our entire investigation for us." The prosecutor's office is going to love you. I believe in being thorough, I said modestly, though internally I was doing a victory dance that would embarrass my daughter. Thorough is an understatement. Most people show up with maybe a cell phone video and some emotional testimony. You showed up with a full multimedia presentation complete with timeline, witness statements, and physical evidence. If you ever want to change careers, we could use someone like you in the DA's office. I laughed. I'll stick with project management, but I appreciate the offer. How's it going in there? I nodded toward the interrogation room. Detective Harris's smile turned into something more like satisfaction. Ms. Pemberton is having a difficult time explaining her actions, which is not surprising given that there isn't really a reasonable explanation for assaulting a child. Her husband is trying to frame it as a mental health episode, which would be more compelling if she hadn't posted on social media about it afterward like it was a parenting win. We're about to wrap up, and I'll be recommending charges to the prosecutor. What kind of charges are we looking at? Misdemeanor assault on a minor, possibly child endangerment, depending on how aggressive the prosecutor wants to be. It won't be prison time, probably probation and mandatory counseling, but it'll be on her record. And given that this has already made local news, it's going to follow her around for a while. The local news. I'd seen the article online, local mom charged after birthday party haircut incident, and it had gotten surprising traction. The comments section had been brutal, with most people expressing shock that an adult would do something like this and questioning Crystal's fitness as a parent. A few people had tried to defend her, suggesting there must be more to the story, but they'd been quickly overwhelmed by the majority who thought cutting a kid's hair as punishment was absolutely insane. That works for me, I said. I just want there to be consequences. I want my daughter to see that when someone hurts you, you don't just accept it to keep the peace. Detective Harris nodded approvingly. You're a good father, Mr. Mitchell. Your daughter's lucky to have someone willing to stand up for her, even when it's uncomfortable. She stood up, signaling our conversation was ending. We'll be in touch as this moves forward. The prosecutor will probably want to meet with you and your daughter at some point, if you're comfortable with that. Absolutely. Whatever we need to do. I finished signing my paperwork and was walking back toward the exit when the door to interview room 2 opened again and Crystal and Doug emerged into the hallway. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, not maliciously. Okay, maybe slightly maliciously, but mostly just because I wanted them to know I was here, that I wasn't backing down, that this wasn't going away. Crystal saw me first. Her eyes widened, and her face went from upset to horrified in about half a second. Doug's expression shifted to anger, his jaw clenching as he steered Crystal toward the exit like he was trying to escape a dangerous situation. I took a slow sip of my coffee, which was cold by now, but I committed to the bid anyway, and gave them my brightest, most cheerful smile. Morning, guys, I said, my voice friendly enough to be mistaken for genuine if you didn't know better. Hope you brought good lawyers. Or better scissors, at least. Detective Harris, who was standing a few feet away processing some paperwork, turned away quickly, but not before I saw her shoulders shake with suppressed laughter. Crystal made a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a gasp. Doug looked like he wanted to say something. Probably something aggressive that would get him his own assault charge, but Crystal pulled him toward the exit before he could. I watched them leave, Crystal practically running to get out of there, and felt that warm glow of satisfaction that comes from knowing you've done the right thing even when everyone told you not to. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. I know you're at the police station. This is too much. I texted back, just making sure justice gets served. Also, their coffee here is terrible. Don't worry, I brought my own. She didn't respond, which meant she was somewhere between furious and resigned, but I'd deal with that later. Right now, I had paperwork to finish and a daughter to pick up from school who deserved to know that her dad had her back. Always, no matter how many family dinners turned awkward or how many in-laws stopped talking to us. I finished my cold coffee, signed the last form, and headed out into the sunshine with the kind of spring in my step that only comes from watching karma work exactly as advertised. Some people called it petty. I called it parenting. And the police? They called it justice. Works for me. Crystal got slapped with misdemeanor assault and child endangerment charges faster than you can say bad parenting decisions. Doug tried suing me for emotional distress, which was hilarious considering his wife traumatized my kid. I countered by suggesting he invest in acting lessons instead of lawyers. The local news ate it up. Birthday bash turns barber battle became their headline. And suddenly my coworkers were buying me coffee all week like I'd won some kind of championship. Trent framed the article in his office. Best part? A professional stylist saw the story online and gave Zoe a free makeover. She looked absolutely stunning, but better than that? She smiled again. Really smiled. A month later, the dust finally settled. Crystal and Doug moved 3 towns over for what they called a fresh start, which is code for running away from the consequences of our actions. Emma switched schools. The family group chat went silent. Patricia stopped calling. Lila eventually came around, though it took her seeing Zoe's therapy bills and hearing our daughter's nightmares to realize that protecting Crystal had cost us all more than any argument ever could. She apologized, actually apologized, for choosing her sister's comfort over our daughter's safety. Progress. The best moment came during Zoe's class presentation about someone who inspires you. She stood up there, confident in her stylish pixie cut, and told 30 kids, "My dad didn't make a scene. He made history." I got called to pick her up early because apparently that statement required a parent-teacher conference. But whatever. Worth it. Now, whenever someone tells me don't make a scene, I just grin and say what's become my personal motto. Don't worry, I don't make scenes. I make sequels. Because sometimes the quiet ones aren't weak. We're just saving our energy for when the spotlight's on the guilty and the cameras are rolling at the police station. Justice isn't loud. It's patient. And it always gets the last word.